We're going to do our Pledge of Allegiance. Please call the roll, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Dominguez? Here. Councilmember Rouse? Here. Councilmember Sneddon?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Friedman?
Here.
Councilmember Harmon?
Here.
Councilmember Gutierrez?
Here.
And Mayor Murillo.
Here. Thank you. So we have our ceremonial item to start us out with. Ms. Clerk.
Item number 1, subject Employee Recognition Service Award pins.
Mr. Casey.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and council members. As you know, each month I like to come and recognize employees for achieving certain milestones in their service to the city. And so I'd like to read some names into the record. With 5 years of service to the city, Sarah King, Public Safety Dispatcher 2 with the Police Department, and Stephen Cornejo, Streets Maintenance Worker 2 in the Public Works Department. With 15 years of service, Christy Lanning, Human Resources Analyst 2, Administrative Services Department. With 20 years of service, Sam Blackwell, Building Inspector, Community Development Department. And Daryl Shawn, Laboratory Analyst 2 with the Public Works Department. And with 25 years of service, John Gordon, Senior Streets Maintenance Worker, Public Works Department.
Let's give him a big hand. Thank you so much, Mr. Casey. Are there any changes to the agenda?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay, so this is our public comment period where we get to hear from the public on items that are not on the formal agenda. Carolina Bate, you're first. Come on up. Nicole is sitting in the back there, and she will make an appointment with us if you need to meet with us or if you need answers from staff. We can't really get into a conversation with you to comply with the Brown Act. So Caroline, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you for allowing me to speak about President Trump's recent economic accomplishments. In October, 128,000 jobs were added to our economy. Our stock market has reached record high levels, the benefits of which are distributed throughout America to people's 401k retirement plans. Most important of all, however, is our very low national unemployment rate of 3.6%, which includes record low unemployment rates for African Americans and Hispanic Americans. President Trump has created over 6.5 million new jobs for the people of our country. But President Trump's ability to achieve our great economy would not have been possible without our free market, private property, capitalist economic system, which has proven to serve our nation as well today as it did at her very beginning. For example, because of our free market business economy encourages taking financial risk for the development of innovation and technology, our military has the capability of accomplishing very complicated missions, such as that of removing the threat of Islamic terrorist leader Bashar al-Baghdadi. Another example of the power of capitalism is seen in food production. Improvements in pesticides, fertilizers, and farm equipment have led to such high crop yields that we have to pay farmers to decrease production. But these improvements are only made possible by a free market economic system, where the ownership of property and wealth is by the individual that worked to create it, which gives the incentive for people to develop better and more effective products. Please think very carefully when you hear candidates promising the benefits of socialism. It is very tempting to believe them. In the short term, these systems may even seem successful while they consume the overabundance produced by capitalism. But when the surplus is used up, socialism is unable to replace the goods and services that have now been depleted, let alone make any progress, resulting in the problems of a demand for basic goods and services that far exceeds the supply. Free market business capitalism is the most powerful engine to drive improvement into the lives of everyone in our country. Please support President Trump and please vote Republican. Thank you for being willing to listen and consider these ideas.
Great. Anna Marie Gott, I don't see her out there. We'll save her slip. Peter Marin, come on up. You'll be followed by Phil Walker, Bob Hart, and Ms. Gott if she returns to the chambers. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Marin.
I actually get tired of coming here. For years, homeless people living in RVs have bought passes to waterfront lots for very little money, which enabled them to park their cars there in the daytime, then leave at night, go back to their safe parking spots. Now you've made new rules, right? The new rules make it impossible for several people in RVs who used to get passes to get them now because you've changed the size of vehicles allowed. In other words, this closes the noose even tighter on people who live in vehicles and have no money to live anywhere else and who are not offered housing or shelter by the community. You talk about stakeholder meetings. I got invited to one just now and coming to meet you. But you passed this crap without ever bothering to talk to the safe parking people. That's astonishing to me. When you make a policy that's going to have consequences for people in RVs and for the people who are making a program for them, it's ruinous. Safe parking does not have enough downtown spaces to accommodate all the people who need them. Therefore, people who have nighttime spaces in this area can't be anywhere in this area anymore. The one place they could be was in the waterfront lots, and you've taken that away. I know you're all nice people, but this amounts really to a liberal war on the poor, and we're not going to let it go. You can't keep doing this stuff and expect everybody to smile and say, oh yes, let's meet and see what we can do about it, because you've already done it. That's what I don't understand. Now we're talking about stakeholders, rich people, people with homes and vehicles and houses, talking about what to do about the possessions of people with shopping carts. It's just insane. If you can't protect the poor in this community, then you should step down and let other people be on the council who can. Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Walker?
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. I still have a hard time wrapping my mind around Mr. Walker. I was enlisted in the U.S. Army, speaking of Veterans Day just occurring 2 days ago, and you never called a drill sergeant, Fort Lewis, Washington. Sir, that's embedded in there. But my dad was an officer in World War II, so he was a true Mr. Walker. Okay. The whole thing was street sweeping on Veterans Day, which is pretty well recognized as a national holiday, trips people up because it's not recognized as a city holiday. And I had two of the neighbors, both got tickets right down the curb from me there. And it's been going on for years and years. Maybe something could be worked into that where you get a little sticker that goes on the street sweeping no parking sign. Vets Day is not a recognized City of Santa Barbara holiday or something. But, it's good for revenue. I understand that. But the Australian bottle flame tree right at my curb and driveway there, the parking apron, or AKA Franceschi flame tree, Acer brachychiton. That thing has been defoliating nonstop since this past January, this past year. And I think it's cycling with the southern hemisphere because they're having terrible, terrible fires right now in, Aussie land. So maybe it's trying to tell me something, tell the whole city something. Okay, one other quick thing. After the parade, the Vets Parade on Saturday, there was amazing. I recognized their uniforms immediately. They were dressed in cavalry uniforms. The 11th Armored Cav reps, probably a couple squads of them with horses. But I was amazed. They were reloading their horses onto their trailers there right between the Vets Building and Sambo's area. And children were walking by and horses, you got to be careful around them. And they were, sort of antsy too, but you can get kicked very easy. I've been around them and gotten clobbered a few times too. So maybe they could do it on the seaside of Cabrillo and where they have more room, possibly set their trailers up and load and offload and reload the horses. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks. Bob Hart, you're next, and Ms. Gott, you'll go last. Thanks.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and council members. I'm Bob Hart from the Association of Realtors. I recently attended the presentation from Dr. Gregory Morrow of UC Berkeley at the Impact Hub, which got me thinking about our local housing situation, and I wanted to just share some thoughts with you prior to your meeting with your joint meeting with the Planning Commission later this week. The governor doesn't say we have a housing situation, a housing problem, or a housing concern. He and others say we have a housing crisis. Throughout California, city and county state governments are all referring to the shortage of housing as a crisis, but it appears that we don't have a crisis management response. The state has begun taking away local discretion from local housing policy. That's part of their crisis management. And an important step the city of Santa Barbara has taken is their average unit size density program. We applaud you for the AUD program. We brag about it throughout the state and the nation when we meet with our colleagues of other realtor associations. We especially are supportive of mixed-use AUD projects that will help provide housing where people want to live while simultaneously revitalizing the downtown and Milpas areas. To alleviate our crisis, the cities and counties need to reduce or remove some of the implements to building. It should not take years to get through the planning and design process. The holding costs, permitting fees, impact fees, et cetera, make it difficult for a builder to build workforce housing projects. The numbers of AUD applications have gone down largely due to the increased cost of construction and increased restrictions. You can't control the construction costs, we understand that, but you do control the planning and permitting fees and the restrictions that are imposed. An important fact that Dr. Murrow brought forward was that the development that is denser will bring more tax dollars per acre. AUD projects, actually any building project, will increase property tax and sales tax for the city. So to alleviate our crisis, I recommend that you look outside the box that we currently live within. You have a policy that departments need to be self-sufficient in their funding, which makes it nearly impossible to reduce building fees. But here's a thought that I'd like to float. If you break that mold and greatly reduce the fees and the time it takes for building, the city will actually generate more revenue through the additional property tax and sales tax that's revenue generated while we increase housing. So I recommend you don't just call the housing shortage a crisis, but that you treat it like a crisis and make it a priority for the city. Look outside the normal solutions, be creative as you help Santa Barbans have a nice place to live. By the way, we'd also like to see some focus on some for sale housing in addition to rental housing. That homeownership plays a vital role in building strong communities. A lot of social benefits like increased volunteerism, improved health, less crime, et cetera. So I thank you for your time to float that real quick and just say that if you have any questions, call me, that I can do in less than 3 minutes. I'd be glad to discuss it. Thanks.
Thanks. Ms. Gott, come on.
Good afternoon, council members. So the gentleman just said we have a housing crisis, and he's absolutely right. But did you know that we're still permitting short-term vacation rentals in the city of Santa Barbara? And those short-term vacation rentals are often never even reviewed, meaning no one actually will even pull up Street View to see if what is written down on the design files as something that says it's there right now is actually real, or if it's someone's a figment of their imagination. Please jot down this address, 6 West Valerio. 6 West Valerio. Last week, that 2-story with commercial on the bottom and a single family on the top floor actually was permitted to be turned into a short-term vacation rental. So this mixed-use building appears to now going to be entirely commercial. It says that there are 3 units on the top floor, and that's right because they are all illegal residential dwelling units. On the bottom floor, it appears that there are 2 of 3 spaces that are residential. And guess what? If you looked at Street View, you would have discovered that the garage is missing and there is no parking. So tell me, if the city is requiring a parking space for every bedroom for a short-term vacation rental, how is it a property with no parking could actually be approved to become a short-term vacation rental? I have no idea. But that seems to be yet another processing problem with your planning department. No one seems to be looking and vetting at projects properly. More importantly, we have, I believe, 5 residential units in that particular building. So are we now going to evict 5 of our residents so that tourists on the weekends can come to Santa Barbara when we have a housing crisis? At what point are we actually going to enforce upon our own ordinances that say you are not allowed to have short-term vacation rentals in most of the areas in Santa Barbara? We have approximately 800 illegal short-term vacation rentals, all of which could house our residents. But instead, they are housing tourists, and I don't see anyone on City Council doing anything about it. And it is desperately needed. We have to stop permitting short-term vacation rentals. We have to enforce upon our ordinances that we have on the books now, and we have to return that housing to our residents. Thank you.
Thanks. That closes public comment, and we'll go on to our consent calendar. Ms. Clerk, are there items to read? Thanks.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Item number 3, subject adoption of ordinance approving the 2019 to 2020 management salary plans. Recommendation that council adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the council of the city of Santa Barbara adopting the 2019 to 2020 salary plan applicable to unrepresented managers and professional attorneys and the 2019-2020 salary plan applicable to certain unrepresented safety managers. Item number 4, subject adoption of ordinance approving the addendum to the 2018 to 2020 General Unit Memorandum of Understanding and adoption of the resolution amending resolution number 19-041, the position and salary control resolution for fiscal year 2020. Recommendation that Council A, adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara adopting the addendum of the 2018 to 2020 Memorandum of Understanding between the City of Santa Barbara and the Santa Barbara City Employees Association General Unit, and providing for compensation changes for confidential employees, and B, adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara amending resolution number 19-041, the position and salary control resolution for fiscal year 2020 affecting the salaries and general unit unrepresented managers and confidential classifications effective November 12, 2019. Item number 5, subject resolution for summary vacation of unused road right-of-way at Arroyo Burrow Restoration Project at Palmero Drive. Recommendation that council adopt, by reading of title only, a resolution of the council of the city of Santa Barbara declaring the summary vacation of public right-of-way described in document 1100, Book 2295, page 1429, document 9468, Book 2305, page 1218, and document 9470, Book 2305, page 1224 of the official records of the County of Santa Barbara.
Thank you so much. And if there's no further objection, we'll waive further reading of the consent items, and I will entertain a motion to move our consent calendar forward. Dominguez.
Second.
And a second from Friedman. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, consent calendar done. Mr. Dominguez, do you have a report from the Finance Committee meeting today?
Yes, Madam Mayor. We forwarded some recommendations with regard to the Mills Act to the full council to appear at a future council meeting.
All right, good job. Thank you. We'll move on to number 12. Ms. Rodriguez.
Item number 12, subject, public meeting on renewal of the Santa Barbara South Coast Tourism Business Improvement District.
Thanks. Ms. Johnson, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and council members. Today we're going to be conducting a public meeting to renew the Santa Barbara South Coast Tourism Business Improvement District, known as the TBID. The Property and Business Improvement District Law of 1994 authorizes the formation and renewal of the TBID. It allows for the creation of a special benefit assessment district to raise funds and provide services to lodging establishments within a specific geographic area. So through the TBID, the City of Santa Barbara, City of Goleta, and County of Santa Barbara levy an assessment, provide services to the lodging establishments, and then remit the TBID funds to Visit Santa Barbara. This is a map that shows the boundaries of the improvement district. The TBID was initially formed in 2011 with a 4-year term, and then it was renewed in 2014 with a 6-year term. So that's the current TBID we're in, and it's set to expire at the end of next year. Visit Santa Barbara has conducted a number of meetings and done outreach with lodging establishments, and they recently submitted petitions to renew the TBID with 62% of the assessment value. A management district plan was also submitted, and you have a revised copy next to you with your presentations. The key steps in the timeline involve, last month, council already approved the resolution of intention to renew the TBID, and at that time, notices were sent to all the lodging establishments with the details of the assessment, the public meeting dates, the public hearing date, and instructions if they wish to oppose the assessment. At today's public meeting, we'll hear a presentation from Visit Santa Barbara on what they propose and also hear public comment. Today is not a date for council to take action. There's no item in front of you today. At the public hearing on December 10th, council will consider then renewing the TBID and adopting the revised management district plan. At the public hearing in December, we'll review the number of protests we've received, and council will confirm whether there is a lack of a majority protest. So a majority protest would be receiving opposition from 50% or more of the assessment value. So that will happen on December 10th. At that time, if we confirm there is no majority protest, council would consider a resolution to renew the TBID and then adopting the management district plan. When council makes that decision on a parallel track, we will look at the current TBID. Basically, once we approve the renewal of the TBID, we will be phasing out the existing district term. So council will also initiate the steps to modify the existing district term. So we'll have another public hearing in January to adopt a resolution to modify the existing TBID. The proposed TBID is scheduled to begin in February 1, 2020. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Kathy Janega Dykes, Executive Director of Visit Santa Barbara, and she will give a presentation.
Welcome, Ms. Janega Dykes.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the council. My name is Kathy Janega Dykes. I'm president and CEO of Visit Santa Barbara. And Ms. Johnson just outlined the mechanics of forming a tourism business improvement district. In the next few moments, I'd like to continue talking about the renewal process, specifically about some new changes that we made to the terms, and certainly demonstrating the benefits to our hotel industry. Our goal, of course, is to create a very unified industry. And as Nina just referenced, we completed the petition process with 62.4% support from our lodging industry. However, we realized that there were a number of lodging businesses that wanted to make some changes to the process as well, too. So I'm happy to report that we were able to successfully negotiate so that all lodging segments will benefit. And as you know, there's certainly not a perfect business model out there. Our goal was to create one that we felt would benefit all players, whether it would be an economy property, a mid-tier property, or certainly a luxury property. You're going to hear from Andrew Firestone shortly after my comments to talk about the ways that we were able to make some changes. On the screen is a summary of the TBID approved in 2014, and certainly the recent one proposed for 2020 to 2024. So this term is a revision proposed by Visit Santa Barbara after consultation with the hotel industry, moving from a 10-year term to a 5-year term. The jurisdiction, however, remains the same. All lodging business, regardless of size, in Santa Barbara, Goleta, and portions of the unincorporated areas here in the South Coast. The unincorporated area extends from El Capitan in the west to the Ventura County line in the east, including Montecito and Summerlin, but excludes Carpinteria. And the plan projects the first calendar year will generate an additional $1.1 million to fund additional promotional services. Each property is assessed based on their annual average daily rate. This has not changed at all. One additional tier, however, has been added and proposed for a $350 plus average rate. So this has increased the actual rate that luxury properties will pay, those that have that annual average daily rate, by 44% beginning February 1st. Vacation rentals or short-term rentals will be assessed a fixed rate of $4 per night, and this is really the medium hotel assessment rate. Another change that we made is in our escalator clause. So assessments may increase in 2022, but not more than 10%. And then if increased, this rate would remain in effect through 2024. So at the year prior, our lodging, our TBID committee and our board of directors will have the option of taking a look if they'd like to impose that escalator anywhere between 0 and 10%, and it will be dependent on market conditions and also the programs that would be funded by that as well, too. And this is also a recent revision to the management district plan, too. And I think most importantly for us, we wanted to make sure that we were not outpricing ourselves out of the competition. We heard this loud and clear from our lodging industry. So to check our math, we've shopped our competitors, and this chart outlines that. So how do our local taxes and assessments look at a property with a $240 average daily rate, which is kind of the average across the TBID in 2018. And as you can see, thankfully, Santa Barbara is just as competitive in 2020 as it was in 2019. So now I'd like to talk more about what are the benefit to the payers, which is the lodging industry. This is a graph that shows a general allocation of funds by service category. As you can see, the largest percent of dollars is spent on advertising and public relations, over $3 million. But I'd like to show you how we've been able to deliver those services in the past year. If we take a look at air service growth, as you know, Visit Santa Barbara is very engaged, working very closely with the staff at Santa Barbara Airport to encourage more air service to the Santa Barbara area. But beyond just approaching all of the airlines, we actually fund advertising campaigns to make sure that this service is maintained, and we're able to maintain this service throughout the year. We recently spent $50,000 with Delta to promote their brand new service that launched in August. We did the same thing in Dallas when American Airlines also launched their service. United Airlines just recently announced direct service to Chicago, and we will be spending funding to help promote that service, which begins in June as well, too. And establishing these new routes can really open up new markets, which certainly benefit all levels of hotel properties. As I'd mentioned previously, the largest spend is really on advertising and promotions. And as you can see, this is an example of one of our new campaigns that launched last year that generated 60 million ad impressions. The Santa Barbara Effect is really described as a way of taking experiences and emotions we already know to the next level. We, of course, know the natural beauty is immediate and incomparable. The geographic diversity of the region and the ease to it is unmatched, and the locals' loves for their communities and welcoming spirit is infectious. And we have a series of these campaigns that are running throughout the year, again, generating that 60 million ad impressions. And of course, this was a year of unprecedented publicity. We just generated an amazing amount of publicity for this community and made so many of the best of lists. In fact, if you saw the recent issue of Travel and Leisure, there was a beautiful spread on Santa Barbara again, and we have more coming up in the next couple of months. And certainly, we're very proud of our community's website. Again, 4 million website page views as well, too. And it really makes it one of the most important websites for our travel community. But the real benefit is really the hundreds of thousands of referrals this traffic generates for all of our hospitality businesses, and particularly our hotels. And then this year, we actually generated 20,000 rooms in group business, and that includes conferences, incentive programs, association meetings, which is so important for our lodging industry. We particularly focus on midweek and then off-season business as well. And this 20,000 was actually an all-time high, too. So I'd like to close my comments by inviting Mr. Andrew Firestone to the podium to talk about how we've been able to come up with a way to really unite our industry.
Thank you. Mr. Firestone, welcome.
I don't have any slides. Thank you for listening today, Madam Mayor and Council. I'm here as part of Kathy's presentation as opposed to public comment because I'm representing about 31 hotels, and it would have taken about an hour of your time to say the same thing over and over again. So I hope you'll let me kind of explain our position and what we've been able to accomplish. And first off, I want to say thank you to Council. I had a chance to meet with each and every one of you. You were very generous with your time, and I appreciate that. And to your staff, especially Holly Perea, was incredibly helpful in explaining how the public is able to interact with you effectively, scheduling and things like that. I think this is a good example of when government works, when we were able to come to a solution, and instead of just crying about a problem, but coming up with a solution outside and not making you all at the dais have to make a tough decision. We were able to do that ourselves because Kathy and her team were very, very gracious with their time as well. The issue was never whether or not the TBID was valuable. It is, and for all the reasons that Kathy said, it was whether it was being assessed fairly and where it was equitable to all hotels and benefiting all hotels. And because of where we live and the reputation that Santa Barbara Montecito has, it often starts to skew towards luxury. But Santa Barbara wants to be accessible to all travelers. And I think everybody here in this room can agree that we do not want to exclude any category of traveler. We want the weekend warriors, we want the honeymooners, we want everybody in between. And I think what we're able to do with this next 5 years is to create a marketing plan that's going to do that effectively. There were 5 issues that we had concerns about, one of which was the term of the TBID, which was 10 years. Second was how the assessment was being collected. Thirdly was automatic increases. Fourthly was there too much of an emphasis on luxury properties? And fifth, how are we being represented on the board? And I'm happy to say that we were able to solve 4 of those issues. And these were critical, I think, in getting consensus across the budget and mid-scale hotels. As you saw here, previously it was 10 years, now we're at 5 years, which I think gives us a better opportunity in 5 years to reassess what the market's doing, what Santa Barbara's doing as a hospitality market, just what are the conditions there in 5 years. Secondly, the automatic 10% increases every 2 years have been removed. And we do have the option, if the board and Visit Santa Barbara both decide that that's the thing to do, we can raise our rates ourselves, but there isn't that that specter of an automatic increase sitting out there that we would increase automatically. Thirdly is that the management district plan is going to remove the dedicated luxury travel promotion, which I think is good optics for everybody, for all of the hotels, to know that there isn't specific money set aside just for luxury hotels, but we are going to spread as needed across all hotel categories. Also, I'm looking forward to being a candidate to join both the TBID board and the Visit Santa Barbara board and be able to be a voice, because it's not good just to come up with reasons why you're upset, but got to come up with solutions. So I do want to, one more time, say thank you to Kathy and her team. This all happened on Thursday, so it was sort of in the 11th hour, so I apologize if you guys didn't get the information ahead of time, but we were working on it over the weekend, and also speaking with all the other hotels. Rounding up 31 small hotel properties in Santa Barbara is complicated. Communicating with them is complicated. So it was literally up until last night getting consensus. So I do have tons of letters from all of these hotels, but I'm not going to turn them in with their understanding that with these changes that have been put in place, there was pending litigation that we are going to remove, seeing that this is going to be going through as outlined in the new updated management district plan. That's all I have to say right now. But again, thank you to the council for your time. And again, if there's any questions specifically, I'd be happy to answer them. But again, thank you to Visit Santa Barbara. Thank you to you guys. This worked. So thank you.
Very good. We have some public comments. Let's go ahead.
If I could just make one more comment, and I think Andrew summed it up well. Okay. We just had successful conversations. And I'd just like to remind everyone what we all do, which is really about inspiring overnight travel to the Santa Barbara South Coast in order to enhance the community's economy and quality of life. Thank you very much for your time.
Oh, thank you. Before we go to public comment, are there questions for Ms. Johnson, Mr. Firestone, or Ms. Janega Dykes? No, we're good. Janet Judd, you'll be first. Still here? Warren Nocon after you. Richard Good. Denise Payne. And Tom Patton will be the final speaker. You have 3 minutes, Ms. Judd. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm Janet Judd. I'm the Director of Operations for G6 Hospitality, and we own 3 hotels in the TBID. We have the 2 Motel 6s in Santa Barbara and the 1 in Goleta. I'm also a TBID member, and I stand here in support of the TBID renewal for 2020-2024. I'm an original petitioner, and I support the compromised plan that you have before you. As you know, Motel 6 is an iconic economy motel founded in Santa Barbara in 1962 by 2 local contractors, and it's really for the no-frills traveler. So the removal of the designated funds for the high-end hotels were of interest to me, so I'm happy that that happened. Visit Santa Barbara's marketing campaigns position Santa Barbara in a way that keeps our occupancy and rates far above the national average. For an economy property, we're allowed to set our rates that are much higher in comparison to other parts of the country. By working together to market Santa Barbara through the TBID, our businesses reach larger markets than we could do certainly on our own. The services provided by the TBID are valuable to our business. I believe the assessment rates in the service plan are fairer than past assessments. I support the 5-year renewal, and I have confidence in the industry governance plan. So thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. Mr. Nocon, come on up.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the council. My name is Warren Nocon, General Manager for the Hotel Californian. Not talking about parking today. I am here in support of the renewal of the T-bid. I have a unique position in our industry, having started my career in economy, having gone through all the different levels of hotel, and now proudly have opened the Luxury Hotel Californian. The services provided by the T-bid and Visit Santa Barbara are invaluable to a hotel like mine that does not have a major brand backing us. We need the services of Visit Santa Barbara, funded by the T-bid, so that we can continue to make Santa Barbara the #1 destination for the rest of the world, as delineated by several publications this past year. As an original petitioner, I also support the compromise plan drafted this week. The assessment rates and service plan is even more fair than the past assessments, and that is coming from one of the properties that is receiving a 44% increase in our assessment rates. We are going up $2.15. And every time you apply a percentage, I was always told when I got my first raise, 10% of nothing is nothing. But 10% of a lot is a lot. So get to a lot when you're making money so you can get those percent raises. And I'm okay with those percent raises on our assessments because it just it increases the value of what Visit Santa Barbara does for us. I also support the 5-year renewal and have confidence in this industry's governance plan. Thank you for your time.
All right, thanks. Mr. Good, are you here? You'll be followed by Denise Spain. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and fellow council members. My name is Richard Good. I'm part of the leadership team at El Capitan Canyon Resort. I've also served multiple terms as an executive committee member and board member for Visit Santa Barbara. Imagine an organization without board members or a pay-to-play pathway to board membership. Just a stakeholder-elected group of top leadership in local hospitality working side by side with a nationally recognized team of DMO professionals promoting Santa Barbara. This is Visit Santa Barbara and the partnership of the T-bid. Without the essential funding of the T-bid, Santa Barbara would be at a gross disadvantage to other destination markets. The tremendous work, first to pioneer one of the early T-bid programs in California, but then to build a sustainable and equitable management strategy, is a true testament of the partnership and management that supports our local T-bid. From the good times to the difficult ones, the services funded by the T-bid have been essential and critical to our business. As an original petitioner, I support the revised plan presented to move forward the T-bid. We welcome the revised 5-year renewal term and support moving forward with the compromised plan as outlined today. Thank you for your time and support.
All right, you're welcome. Ms. Spain? Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thanks for hearing me. My name is Denise Spain, and I am the general manager from the longest continually operating hotel in Southern California, the historic Upham Hotel, built in 1871 and has been a hotel the entire time. We're very proud of that. I'm here today to support the 5-year renewal, and I have confidence in the industry governance plan. The partnership that the Upham has with Visit Santa Barbara is, we just couldn't do without it. With a hotel as small as ours, with a small marketing budget, could not reach the people that Visit Santa Barbara helps us to reach. They bring us clients and guests from all over the world, not just the country. And it's just immeasurable how much value that we get from that organization and from the T-bid. And I thank you for your time, and we just couldn't do it on our own, so we really appreciate the T-bid and Visit Santa Barbara. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for being here. Mr. Patton?
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and fellow council members. I'm Tom Patton, General Manager and partner in the Ramada Santa Barbara, also the current Visit Santa Barbara Board Chair. I was in support of the original T-bid plan and stand in support of the revised T-bid plan that's before you today. As Kathy said, there is no perfect plan that everybody's going to agree on, but from day one when we formed the T-bid back in 2011, I think we worked for almost 2 years having lots of community outreach, one-on-one meetings with the hoteliers trying to find a plan that would actually work for everyone. Initially, we looked at a percentage-based model. There was 2 large detractors with that. By state law, the larger payers get a larger weighted vote. This didn't sit well with the smaller and mid-tier hotels, which diluted their voting strength. And two, during economic downturns, that percentage model brings in less revenue, which is direly needed during those downturns. Looked at the flat assessment rate modeled. Again, on a proportionate basis, the smaller mid-tier hotels pay a larger percentage, so that didn't work. So we had to go back to the drawing board, and that's where we came up with this tiered assessment model. And while it's not the perfect solution, we had a majority of hoteliers that were in support of that. We were able to move forward. We've renewed it once, and we're here again to renew it a second time around. Kathy and her team have always provided an ample opportunity for the hoteliers to come and speak. We have quarterly TBID meetings. We've got our annual marketing plan, which everybody is invited to attend. So again, we always encourage broad support from all our hoteliers. I've been on the VSB board and the TBID committee for many years, and we always strive to find those ways to achieve the maximum benefit for the greatest number of lodging businesses. Don't favor any segment over another one. VSB's marketing efforts were especially critical after the debris flows and the fires, and there's no way that we could have rebounded as quickly as we did without the marketing efforts of Visit Santa Barbara. So in closing, I want to thank the city for their partnership and their support of the TBID over the past almost 10 years. And again, I also acknowledge that, like in politics, we're never going to satisfy 100% of the constituents, but we always try to do the best we can at the end of the day. So thank you for your support, and I support the TBID renewal.
Okay, very good. So that closes public comment, and we're really happy to hear the report today. And if anyone has any comments, I will just say that you always do such a good job with your marketing and showcasing our area to the whole world. And I know you focus on Southern California. We love people coming up and visiting our beautiful city and the whole region. So thanks for your good work, and so glad that you all came to an amicable agreement without litigation. Mr. Dominguez, go ahead.
So I'd like to thank everyone who took part in this process. Ms. Janega Dykes, you and your staff did a great job. Ultimately, really appreciate the fact that you reached out and that you were able to reach an agreement. I think that's a real show of power when you reach out even when you don't necessarily have to and get everyone on board. I think we need to focus more on that in our democracy locally and nationally to get consensus rather than have parties that want to steamroll each other. So you guys led this example. I hope you guys can meet with other groups in Santa Barbara who may have different opinions but want to bring together a strong product, because I think ultimately this is a really strong product. Mr. Firestone, same thing for you. Thank you for reaching out in a very productive and constructive manner. You said you're going to be a candidate Firestone, nothing we've ever heard before here in Santa Barbara. So good luck with that, and please, everyone here, stay involved and stay positive, because this is the mission to enhance the community's economy and quality of life. So with that, I'd like to move forward the staff recommendation.
Oh, I don't think we need to take
We don't need a
formal
recommendation
vote today.
Okay.
But thanks for that. Did you want to, Ms. Snedden? No, you were just adjusting. Okay. So, but we'll be back December 10th, and at that time there'll be more information. Go ahead, Ms. Johnson.
Madam Mayor, on December 10th, we'll be conducting the public hearing. Okay. So at that time, council will take action. You will adopt a resolution to renew the TBID and also the management district plan.
Okay, so maybe we'll see some of you again on December 10th. Okay, thank you. We'll close this item. And we'll go on to number 13. Ms. Clerk?
Item number 13, subject public hearing and adoption of 2019 California Building Standards Codes for adoption. Recommendation that council conduct a public hearing and adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara amending Chapter 22.04 of the Municipal Code and adopting by reference the 2019 edition of the California Building Code, Volumes 1 and 2, the 2019 edition of the California Residential Code, the 2019 edition of the California Electrical Code, the 2019 edition of the California Mechanical Code, the 2019 edition of the California Plumbing Code, the 2019 edition of the California Energy Code, the 2019 edition of the California Historical Building Code, the 2019 edition of the California Existing Buildings Code, the 2019 edition of the California Green Building Standards Code, the 2019 edition of the California Reference Standards Code, and the 2015 International Property Maintenance Code adopting local revisions to those codes, and repealing ordinance number 5639.
Okay, very good. So, Mr. Casey, we heard this item already. How is today different from, it's a follow-up hearing on it?
Correct, Madam Mayor. We were just going to do a very short verbal presentation. It is the adoption of the ordinance, but it was a split vote, and so we just brought it back as an administrative item, but this is the second vote on the ordinance.
A little more sunshine on it. Okay, very good. Mr. Stuffler, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of Council, I'm Andrew Stuffler. I'm the building official. The state law requires that we introduce this ordinance via City Council. We did that on October 29th. And the state law requires we do 2 successive weeks of public noticing and then have a public hearing, which is what we're doing today. Hopefully the issues were ironed out well on the 29th. Staff stands by the recommendation that we provided in the staff report that City Council has, and we're here to answer any questions you might have.
Okay. Are there any questions? Ms. Snedden, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I had a few questions that I had sent to Mr. Casey earlier today that I'll just reiterate here pertaining to Section J101, the general grading. And I will be voting against this item, particularly just for this page. But my general question is there are plenty in the provisions about what happens when the building official, whoever that might be, sees that more work needs to be done for safety and for hazard. And my question is, if a building official deems that it's safe or doesn't endanger adjoining public streets or sidewalks or adjoining property or drainage or cracking or any of those issues, if a building official determines that that's not the case, but neighbors feel differently, what is the process that those neighbors are supposed to follow?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Snedden, any decision of my office, especially a decision in the field on a matter of that nature, is appealable to the Board of Appeals. But really, we appreciate it if they would call us or email us, contact us, and let us know what their concerns are. We can look into them. We can validate whether that was an element of the decision that was made, or if that is something that maybe isn't in our department and is regulated by someone else, like vector control or creeks or something like that.
And then who staffs the appeals board meeting or the commission meeting?
For city staff, I do. I serve as the secretary according to the ordinance that's before you.
Okay. Those are my only questions, and then I'll just remain with the comment that I believe particularly those issues should be appealable beyond. So I'll be voting against this item.
Very good. Thank you. I don't see any other lights. Mr. Casey, we don't have public comment speakers, so I'll entertain a motion on this particular item. Okay, so that was a motion by Mr. Friedman and seconded by Ms. Harmon. Okay, we're looking at the building one. The fire one is next, right? Okay, so very good. Any other discussion? We'll go ahead and take a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Dominguez?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Friedman?
Yes.
Councilmember Gutierrez?
Yes.
Councilmember Harmon?
Yes.
Councilmember Rouse?
Aye.
Councilmember Snedden?
No.
And Mayor Murillo?
Aye. So that carries 6-1 with Ms. Snedden dissenting. And we'll move on to number 14 with thanks to our building department. Go ahead, Ms. Rodriguez.
Item number 14, subject public hearing and adoption of the 2019 Fire Code. Recommendation that council conduct a public hearing and adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara amending Chapter 8.04 of the Municipal Code and adopting by reference the 2018 edition of the International Fire Code, including Appendix Chapter 4 and Appendices B, BB, C, CC, and H of that code, and the 2019 California Fire Code with local amendments to both codes.
Very good. Go ahead, please.
Mario, members of the City Council, as you recall, on October 29th, we also presented the fire code at the same time the building codes were presented. And as a reminder, at the time we talked about the fact that the fire code has a lot of maintenance and housekeeping type issues in it that are not adopted by the state under Title 24, which is why we adopt it separately. And it falls under Chapter 8.04 of the Municipal Code instead of Chapter 22. A couple of things that I'd like to bring up in relation to that are Chapter 3, which the state doesn't adopt at all, and which we adopt in its entirety. That's general precautions against fire. And the other one is Chapter 49, which is the wildland-urban interface. And I bring that up because we're not making any changes to our standing sections on the wildland issues. And part of the reason is because of our community wildfire protection plan, which is in the process of being updated. That is being updated with an environmental impact report. And I've gotten some questions from council about when it's going to be daylighted to the public. I can now say that in 2 weeks we'll have the website up and running. People can subscribe to it and get notified of updates to the plan. And then in February, probably at the latest, we'll begin public hearings and neighborhood meetings and those kinds of things on the plan. So it is moving according to the pace that we thought it would be. But in the meantime, we're not altering Chapter 49 in any particular great extent. With that, we recommend that the council adopt the fire code, and if you have any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Are there questions for our fire marshal? And there's no public speaker slips, so is there a motion to move this? So that's Snedden, and a second by Harmon. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that one carries unanimously. Thanks so much. Okay, next item. We're clipping along here today. Number 15.
Item number 15, subject appointments to city advisory groups.
Okay. So I can tell you this was a tough one. So many good people applied for the openings. And I just need to say that if you didn't get on this time, there's a few people in the audience and people in TV land, please keep applying. And we are grateful for everyone who put in an application, and thanks for coming up. Not everybody enjoys public speaking. We made you come to the podium, didn't we? So we'll start in alphabetical order with the Access Advisory Committee. And so how it works is people up here will nominate someone, and then we'll take a vote. And this is why we have two clerks for this, because everybody's counting, and we want to do it right. Right. So are there any, if you're ready, clerks, Mr.
I'll move by acclamation since there's two
on the Access Advisory Committee?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. So we're nominating Sean Goral and Nick Kuntz. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. So the Architectural Board of Review, that one has a little more competition. Do I have a nomination? Yeah, go ahead.
For the Architectural Board of Review, there's 3 vacancies, so I will nominate Kevin Moore, Dennis Whalen, and David Black.
Moore, Whalen, Black. Mr. Domingo, okay, go ahead, Ms. Snedden.
May I ask a protocol question? Are we keeping our mics on and calling out, or are we using our lights? Which do you prefer?
Yeah, go ahead and call out. We'll see if we can maintain order without too much craziness. Okay, go ahead.
Moore, Colas, and Anderson.
Okay, so you're adding Anderson and I think she says a Colas, or does she say a Colas?
I don't know.
Okay, I heard Colas at one point. Mr. Dominguez, you going to add someone else, or were
Colas
those
and Black, but it sounds like they're already on the list.
Okay.
Add Meskimen.
Meskimen. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 6. 1, 2. Okay, so everybody's up for it. So now we're going to go down the line. You're going to call our names, and everybody, you pick three of your favorites. Okay. Is that clear? Give me a second. Okay, I'm ready. Go ahead.
Councilmember Friedman,
Kevin Moore, David Black, and Dennis Whalen.
Councilmember Gutierrez,
I echo Mr. Friedman.
Councilmember Harmon,
Moore, Anderson, Black.
Councilmember Rouse,
Moore, Whalen, Black.
Councilmember Sneddon,
Moore, Coles, Anderson.
Councilmember Dominguez,
Coles, Meskimen, Black.
and Mayor Murillo.
Moore, Anderson, Black. So it looks like Moore and Black got in, and it's a tie between Whalen and Anderson. Okay, folks, you get to pick one now, either Whalen or Anderson, right?
So this is just a reminder that 2 licensed architects need to be appointed. So we've got one more needed.
Okay, so Moore is a licensed architect and Black is not. So we need to choose a licensed architect next. So that means Mr. Whalen, because Ms. Anderson is not.
Or Coles.
Leslie Coles is an architect.
Okay, so on this round, someone has nominated Coles and then Mr. Whalen. Do I have that right? Yes. Okay, folks, Coles or Whalen? Go ahead, Ms. Clerk, if you're ready.
Councilmember Friedman,
Whalen.
Councilmember Gutierrez,
Whalen.
Councilmember Harmon,
Whalen.
Councilmember Rouse,
Whalen.
Councilmember Sneddon,
Coles.
Councilmember Dominguez,
Coles.
and Mayor Murillo.
Whalen. Okay, so congratulations to Whalen, Moore, and Black. Okay? Moving on to the Arts Advisory Committee. Are there nominations? It looks like we can vote for 3 out of these 6.
Tico, Yayavi, Smithers.
Okay, you said Tico?
Yes.
Well, go ahead, say it again.
Tico, Yayavi, and Smithers.
Anybody else?
I'll also include Alexandra Terry.
So you're adding Ms. Terry. Okay, any other nominations? Ms. Harmon?
I'd like to nominate Mr. Melroy.
Melroy. Okay, so the choices are Tico, Yayavi, Smithers, Terry, or Melroy, and you get to choose 3. Has everybody got their 3? Go ahead, please.
Councilmember Gutierrez,
Smithers, Yayave, Tico.
Councilmember Harmon,
Yayavi, Tico, Melroy.
Councilmember Rouse,
Tico, Yayave, Smithers.
Councilmember Sneddon,
Tico, Yayavi, Smithers.
Councilmember Dominguez,
Smithers, Yayave, Tico.
Councilmember Friedman,
Alexandra Terry, Yavi, and Smithers.
and Mayor Murillo.
Terry, Yayavi, Smithers. Terry, Yayavi, Smithers. So it looks like Yayavi and Smithers and Tico. Good? We good? Okay. Building and Fire Codes Board of Appeals. Do I have a nomination by acclamation for Jose Barajas?
So moved.
Second.
That was Rouse Snedden. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations to Mr. Barajas. The Civil Service Commission, 4 openings, 4 people. Another acclamation nomination from Gutierrez.
Second.
A second by Harmon. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. So the Community Development and Human Services Committee, it looks like we have 1 applicant for each of these categories that they want. And then, unfortunately, we don't have people for each of the categories, so we'll figure out how to recruit more people next time. Do I have a nomination for these folks by acclamation?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
So that was Snedden, Rouse. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Congratulations to them. Community Events and Festivals Committee, there's 3 openings in the business, lodging, and retail category, and 4 candidates. So let's start with that, and then we'll go to the cultural arts category. So nominations for 3, we need 3, business and lodging, retail.
I'd like to nominate Barry Dorsey, Antoinette Chartier, and Katrina Carl.
Chartier, Dorsey, and Carl.
I'd like to add Olson.
Okay. So all 4 are nominated. Please think of your 3. And we're ready, I think, if you are. Ms. Rodriguez.
Councilmember Dominguez,
Chartier, Dorsey, and Carl.
Councilmember Friedman,
Chartier, Dorsey, Carl.
Councilmember Gutierrez,
Chartier, Dorsey, Carl.
Councilmember Harmon,
Dorsey, Olson, Carl.
Councilmember Rouse,
Chartier, Olson, Carl.
Can you say it slower?
Chartier, Olson, Carl.
Okay.
Councilmember Snedden,
Dorsey, Olson, Carl.
and Mayor Murillo.
Chartier, Dorsey, and Carl. And we need 3. So it's Dorsey, Chartier, and Carl. Okay. Thank you. Creeks Advisory Committee, I'm sorry.
Cultural arts.
I nominate Abeza Mirvali.
Okay.
Loper Fido.
Okay. So it's between Mervali and Loper Fido. We can only choose 1. Are we ready? Go ahead, please.
Councilmember Dominguez,
Mirvali.
Councilmember Friedman,
Mirvali.
Councilmember Gutierrez,
Luper Fido.
Councilmember Harmon,
Mervali.
Councilmember Rouse,
Mervali.
Councilmember Snedden,
Loper Fido.
and Mayor Murillo.
Loper Fido. So Ms. Mervali takes it with a 4-3 vote. Okay. Creeks Advisory Committee, we have 3 applicants, qualified applicants, and 3 openings. Nomination by acclamation?
So moved.
Okay, that was Dominguez Rouse, Dominguez Snedden. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, Creeks Committee. Downtown parking, little competition here, but we have 2 incumbents.
Newkirk and France.
Okay. Newkirk and France nominated. Anybody else? All in favor of Newkirk in France?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, congratulations to them. Fire and Police Commission, we need 2, and there's 5 applicants. We'll take nominations, please.
Almond.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Almond.
Okay, Almond.
Byrne.
Peck.
Goebel.
Goebel.
Mr. Dominguez, you said Byrne?
Correct.
Okay, so we have 4 nominations then: Almond, Peck, Goebel, and Byrne, and 2 openings. Okay, so think of your 2. Whenever you're ready.
Who nominated Beck?
Peck.
Okay. And okay. Councilmember Harmon?
Almond Peck.
Councilmember Rouse?
Almond Goebel.
Councilmember Sneddon?
Almond Goebel.
Councilmember Dominguez?
Almond Byrne.
Councilmember Friedman?
Peck and Goebel.
Councilmember Gutierrez?
Peck. Goebel.
And Mayor Murillo.
Almond, Peck. So Mr. Almond gets in, and it's a tie between Goebel and Peck on the second place. So think who you want, Goebel or Peck, and we'll take another round.
Councilmember Harmon?
Peck.
Councilmember Rouse?
Goebel.
Councilmember Sneddon?
Goebel.
Councilmember Dominguez?
Goebel.
Councilmember Friedman?
Peck.
Councilmember Gutierrez?
Peck.
And Mayor Murillo.
Peck. So Mr. Peck, you got that one. So it's Almond, Peck, new members for the Fire and Police Commission. Moving on to Harbor Commission, where we need 2 people, and we have a couple of incumbents. Wow. I'd like to nominate the 2 incumbents, McCray and Yaniv. Any other nominations?
Nelson.
Okay. So Nelson nominated.
Stanwyck.
Okay. Everybody's nominated. So think of your favorite 2, and whenever you're ready, Ms. Rodriguez.
Councilmember Rouse?
Nelson.
2, you have
I'm
2?
sorry, yeah, Nelson McCray.
Nelson McCray. Okay.
Councilmember Sneddon?
Nelson McCray.
Councilmember Dominguez?
Nelson McCray.
Councilmember Friedman?
Yaniv McCray.
Councilmember Gutierrez?
Yaniv Nelson.
Councilmember Harmon?
McCray Stanwyck.
And Mayor Murillo.
McCray Yaniv. So Mr. McCray is in, and Michael Nelson, right? Nelson McCray. Congratulations. Historic Landmarks Commission, are we ready? It's kind of stressful today, huh? I don't know what it is. I think just we have such good people signed up, so thanks. Historic Landmarks Commission, we need 1, and there's 2 people here. Nominations, please.
Drury.
Any other nominations? All in favor of Mr. Drury? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations to him. Housing Authority Commission, let's do the public at large category first. We can only have one person from that category. Quite a few good candidates, it looks like. Nominations, please.
Nominate Falstich.
Steele.
Allen.
Okay. Falstich, Steele, and Allen have been nominated. You get to pick one, everybody. Go ahead, please.
Councilmember Dominguez,
Falstich.
Councilmember Friedman,
Steele.
Councilmember Gutierrez,
Steele.
Councilmember Harmon,
Falstich.
Councilmember Rouse,
Falstich.
Councilmember Sneddon,
Steele.
and Mayor Murillo.
Falstich. So it's Falstich. Thank you. Moving on to senior tenant. Oh, there's only one candidate. Do we support Mary Fenger?
Yes.
Okay. Do you need a first and a second on these things?
Motion for acclamation.
Okay. And that was Dominguez, Sneddon. All in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations, Ms. Fenger. Library Board, we have 2 vacancies and a whole lot of good people. Nominations, please.
Nominate Manalokis and Wildman.
Manalakis, and the other one?
Wildman.
Okay. Any other nominations, please?
Coble.
Bauer.
Goebel, Bauer. Any others? Okay, so we can choose 2, and we have Manolakos, Wildman, Goebel, and Bauer nominated. Ready?
Councilmember Friedman,
Manalokis and Wildman.
Councilmember Gutierrez,
Wildman and Monolocus.
Councilmember Harmon,
Bauer, Goebel.
Councilmember Rouse,
Monolocus and Wildman.
Councilmember Sneddon,
Wildman, Goebel.
Councilmember Dominguez,
Coble, Bauer.
and Mayor Murillo.
Goebel, Wildman. Yeah. Okay, so Wildman with 5, Goebel with 4 wins? Or appointed? Thank you to everybody who applied. The Neighborhood Advisory Council, it looks like we're appointing to the representative at large 4 openings, 5 people. Mr. Peck is one of them, but he's already been appointed to the Fire and Police Commission, which is a pretty active group. So, do we have nominations? Go ahead.
So I just want to make sure I understand it, because do the notes indicate that those need to be filled for those positions? So say Max Peck, is there 1 opening for Laguna and there's 1 applicant for Laguna? Is that how to interpret that, or is it any 4 at large that are open?
Madam Mayor and Councilmember Sneddon, you could appoint any 4 that on the notes, the neighborhood that's listed on there. That means they'll be the representative of that neighborhood, or for public at large if there's no openings in that neighborhood.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, my suggestion would be the 4 who are not Mr. Peck, because he already got a good position that's going to keep him busy. He's nodding out there, too. So
I recommend Peck.
I think he's saying he's happy with fire and police. Okay.
All right. Noted.
Good. Mr. Peck has some fans up here, which is nice.
I nominate the other 4.
Thank you.
Second.
And a second from Rouse. All in favor of Pena, Glanville, Willard, and Perkins?
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. Thank you. Parks and Recreation, do we have a motion by acclamation for the wonderful Jacob Lesnar Buxton?
So
moved.
Okay. Let's just pick Friedman Harmon. All in favor?
Aye.
Planning Commission.
Madam Mayor,
Go ahead.
may I make a request on this? Can we vote one at a time rather than two at a time? Is that possible? Because if the second choice, like rather than saying both of our votes at once, because if the second choice changes based on the first person that gets selected, is that allowed or that's not allowed?
That's not how we've been doing it. So what?
Okay,
so what?
that's okay.
You would nominate someone and then we would say yes or no on them.
Or just rather we would vote for one person rather than say two, and then go through again for the second. But if that's not how we want to do it, that's fine.
I think. Thanks
That's fine.
for letting us. Yeah. Thank you for that suggestion. But we'll go ahead and we'll take nominations for the Planning Commission. Go ahead, Ms. Harmon, since you.
Oh.
Do you have two that you want to nominate?
No. I'll wait.
You're going to wait. Okay.
I'll nominate all 7 just to get us moving forward.
Oh God.
Wait. No.
I'll
you
nominate Bonderson and Escobedo.
So Bonderson and Escobedo have been nominated. Are there any other nominations?
I'll nominate Gorin.
Gorin in the mix. Anybody else?
Michael Martz.
Martz is nominated.
Nelson.
Nelson nominated. We need to pick 2. Is it appropriate, Mr. Casey, for me to mention that there's going to be a planning commissioner opening in the new year when Michael Jordan goes to the city council? So we'll have another recruitment in January, and so there's going to be more opportunity in the future. So I'm assuming people, if you don't get on now, you might go for it again in January. So we need to pick 2, and the 5 nominated are Bonderson, Escobedo, Gorin, Martz, and Nelson. And whenever you're ready, Ms. Clerk.
Councilmember Rouse.
Martz Escobedo.
Who was the first one?
Martz.
Martz Escobedo. Okay.
Councilmember Sneddon.
Martz Escobedo.
Councilmember Dominguez.
Barnwell Nelson.
Oh, you hadn't nominated Mr. Barnwell, and he did remove. He withdrew his interest in the Planning Commission. I got a memo. Did anybody else get it? You did,
Yes,
yeah.
I did.
So he's only interested in Water Commissioner HLC.
Okay, Nelson Bonderson.
Okay, Nelson Bonderson. Go ahead.
Councilmember Friedman.
Escobedo and Gorin.
Councilmember Gutierrez.
Escobedo and Bonderson.
Councilmember Harmon.
Escobedo, Bonderson.
And Mayor Murillo.
Escobedo Gorin. Okay, so it looks like Escobedo is in, and Bonderson got 3, but we should have 4. So let's go another round. I'm assuming someone will nominate Bonderson?
I'll nominate Bonderson.
Okay, so Bonderson. Anybody else for round 2?
Martz.
Martz. Okay.
And I'll nominate
Nelson.
Gorin.
Gorin again. And Mr. Dominguez, what did you say?
Nelson.
And Nelson. Okay, round 2. Bonderson, Martz, Gorin, and Nelson. Pick one.
Councilmember Rouse.
Martz.
Councilmember Sneddon.
Martz.
Councilmember Dominguez.
Bonderson.
Councilmember Friedman.
Gorin.
Councilmember Gutierrez.
Bonderson.
Councilmember Harmon.
Bonderson.
And Mayor Murillo.
Bonderson. Okay, so Bonderson Escobedo on the Planning Commission. Congratulations to them. And remember, we'll open recruitment for Planning Commission again in January. Rental Housing Mediation Board. it looks like there's only one candidate for the landlord mediator position and one for the homeowner mediator position. Do I have a nomination by acclamation for Michelle Robertson and Lisa Beck?
So moved.
Okay. Sneddon, Murillo will second. All in favor of that?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. So now we move to the tenant category, and there's 3 people. Do I have a nomination or 2?
Loperfido, Alarcon.
Loperfido and Alarcon are nominated. Anybody else?
Daly.
And Daly. Okay, you get to pick 2. All 3 are nominated. Ready? Go ahead.
Councilmember Sneddon,
Loperfido, Alarcon.
Councilmember Dominguez,
Alarcon, Loperfido.
Councilmember Friedman,
Daly, Alarcon.
Councilmember Gutierrez,
Alarcon, Luperfido.
Councilmember Harmon,
Daily Alarcon.
Councilmember Rouse,
Loperfido, Alarcon.
and Mayor Murillo.
Loperfido, Alarcon. So Marilyn Loperfido and Natalia Alarcon are appointed to the tenant category. Moving on to the Santa Barbara Youth Council. Do I have a nomination by acclamation for these 3 individuals?
So moved.
Second.
Sneddon, Harmon. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Single Family Design Board, Lisa James.
Moved by acclamation.
Very good.
Second.
And that was Rouse, Harmon. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations, Lisa James. Transportation and Circulation Committee, 1 opening, 1 person.
Move acclamation.
Second.
That was Rouse, Sneddon. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Final one, Water Commission. So there's 3 openings, 2 incumbents. Michael Jordan is listed as an incumbent, but we cannot appoint him because he's doing something else. Go ahead. I'm open for nominations.
Keller, Bernie are very excellent incumbents, and Jeffrey Young.
And you say that as the liaison to the Water Commission?
Yes.
Okay, so Keller, Bernie, and Young have been nominated.
Hamilton.
Barnwell.
I'd like to nominate Wilson. So we're voting for 3, and the nominees are Wilson, Keller, Bernie, Young, Hamilton, and Barnwell. Okay, so pick your 3.
Councilmember Harmon,
Bernie, Keller, and Wilson.
Councilmember Rouse,
Keller, Bernie, Barnwell.
Councilmember Sneddon,
Keller, Young, Bernie.
Councilmember Dominguez,
Young, Bernie, Keller.
Councilmember Friedman,
Keller, Young, Bernie.
Councilmember Gutierrez,
Hamilton, Keller, Bernie.
and Mayor Murillo.
Keller, Bernie, Wilson. So Keller and Bernie are in with 7 votes apiece. How about that? Unanimous. Young has 3, but we need 4. So let's go another round on this Water Commission nomination process. Fans of Jeffrey Young, you're going to nominate
Young.
him?
Young.
Okay, so Young.
Hamilton.
Barnwell.
Young, Hamilton, Barnwell, and we get to pick one. Go ahead.
Councilmember Harmon,
Young.
Councilmember Rouse,
Barnwell.
Councilmember Sneddon,
Young.
Councilmember Dominguez,
Young.
Councilmember Friedman,
Young.
Councilmember Gutierrez,
Hamilton.
and Mayor Murillo.
Barnwell, but Young got it with 4. So congratulations to him. Is that it? Okay. Again, thanks to everyone who applied. Try again, please. We'll close that item. And do we need to take a break so that the applicant or the appellants can check on their computer? Okay, we're taking a 5-minute break. Thank you. Your conversation outside, please. Thank you. So we restart our meeting, and if the clerk would read the item, please.
Item number 16, subject appeal of the Planning Commission's approval of a parking modification and coastal development permit at 11 Anacapa Street.
Okay, so this is a land use appeal. It's a particularly serious responsibility of the Santa Barbara City Council. It's a quasi-judicial proceeding, and there are specific rules and a format, and this is how our hearing will be structured. The first thing, council members will disclose any ex parte communications. Have you talked to either the appellant or the applicant? Then we have a staff presentation, remarks from a design review board representative, if appropriate, then questions from the council. Then the appellant will get to make a 20-minute presentation. And if the appellant doesn't use up the whole 20, we'll save the 5 or whatever it is, and they can use that to answer questions at the end or for rebuttal. And then the appellant will take questions from the council. Then the applicant gets 20 minutes to present. The same thing. If you don't use up your whole 20, you get to save them to clarify things or rebut public comment, however you want to use your remaining time. Then we take public comment, and then it comes to the council for deliberations. So, anyone have ex parte communications? Mr. Friedman.
Just for the record, emailed, I believe, along with the rest of the council by the appellant on numerous occasions. And I do have a question in regards to late documents, many that came in today. From the appellant, and if we're allowed to include those, or what the procedures are for including things that, I'm going to be honest, I didn't have time to read some of them because they came in so late.
Mr. Parliamentarian, can you tell us?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. The council's most recent procedures in section 3.4 set up some guidelines and rules for submitting information to the council. And the idea is to allow consideration of voluminous and complex material. So your deadline is the week before that people should submit their information. Having said that, the rule says that the council's not under any obligation to read all of the material that has come in after that deadline from the appellant, but you may do so if you wish.
Okay, very good. Does that answer your question? Any other ex parte communications to disclose? Okay, we'll move on to staff presentation. Mr. Bauman or Bowman?
That's right. Tony Bauman, Assistant Planner in the Planning Commission. Thank you. Planning Division. Thank you. The purpose of the hearing today is to hear the appeals of Anna Marie Gott and Accessible Santa Barbara of the Planning Commission's approval of a parking modification and a coastal development permit at 11 Anacapa Street. This is an aerial view of the vicinity of the project. The property is outlined in red. It's bounded by Anacapa Street and Helena Avenue and is one property in from East Carrillo Boulevard. There's a property called 29 East Carrillo Boulevard with a restaurant development on that adjacent site. The zoning, it's OC, ocean-oriented commercial zone, so the uses in the building need to be somehow ocean-related or visitor-serving uses. The land use designation is coastal-oriented commercial. It's in the lower state component area of the city's coastal zone, and the city's local coastal program identifies the relevant issues in that component area to be related to Mission Creek, but this project is some distance away from Mission Creek, so those issues don't particularly apply. It's in a flood area, and the project is complying with building code with regard to flood levels. A big issue in this lower state component area is coastal access and parking. It's part of the Funk Zone, and it's in an area recognized in the coastal program as to be tight for parking, and projects need to demonstrate that they can protect and enhance coastal access. This is just a photograph of the Helena Street elevation of the building. We walked the site yesterday at the site visit. This is one of the two elevations not proposed to be altered. The project it's sort of an adaptive reuse of an old warehouse industrial type building. It's a renovation of this multi-tenant non-residential building circa about 1940. It proposes to convert 2,100 square feet of space to retail and convert 2,500 square feet to a new restaurant. It also does a lot to clean up this old property. There's been a lot of work done without permits over many decades, and this project's addressing a lot of that. It's demolishing some unpermitted, a second floor addition on the roof will be demolished, and also some mezzanine floor areas. It's a tall building, so there was room for people to go in and build mezzanines to get more floor area inside, so that'll be removed. And the project also makes significant accessibility improvements. The old building wasn't conducive to restaurant and retail type uses and didn't have any accessibility. So this project addresses that. The site improvements include accessibility for parking and ramps to get up into the building, a new roughly 1,700 square foot deck, and I put on here for restaurant, but it's a restaurant deck, but it's also an accessibility deck because a path of travel comes through that deck to get into the building, so it's not all for restaurant seating. Most of it is. The project would reconfigure the parking lot. That's the parking lot on the Anacapa Street side of the building. There, as we saw in the site visit, there's some old landscaping planters in the interior of the parking lot with trees. The trees are proposed to be relocated and put into new planters at the perimeter of the parking lot. A new trash enclosure and a valet parking configuration for the parking lot. This shows mainly focused on the building improvements. The building is outlined in blue, and the yellow highlighting is the new restaurant in that northeast corner of the building. The green highlighted areas show the conversion to some retail spaces. The red outlines the exterior deck, and that dashed line through there shows the accessible path. I can point to it with my pointer. So there's a new ramp that would come up from Helena Street, very gradually coming up a couple of feet to the new deck, and the path of travel comes into a new kind of main entrance for the building, and then some interior paths of travel to provide accessibility to the interior tenant spaces. This is the proposed east elevation facing Anacapa Street. You can sort of see how the right half of the building, as shown in this screen, reflects the new tenant improvements, because that right half is where that restaurant is. And you can see the deck here, how it's elevated above the parking lot with these figures standing on it. The ramp would be the far right side of this picture, kind of a elongated view going all the way up from Anacapa Street very gradually up to the deck level. And then the proposed north elevation, the side view of what we were looking at. In this black silhouetted area, you can kind of see a bit. It's almost like a section cut through that deck where it gradually slopes down to the Helena Street, and you can see the proposed architecture. The Architectural Board of Review saw this several times. They're pleased with this design, and they're ready to approve it when it goes back to them for approval after the land use approvals. This is the entire site. Excuse me. The same blue, whoops, this got messed up. Anyway, those outlines got disconnected from the image. This is the building, this white area. This is a rendered site plan, so it pretty readily shows the landscaping. So along right off the corner of the building at Helena Street would be bicycle parking, and then a nice big landscape planter. The pink colored area would be that deck, and then the ramp with a planter between the ramp and the parking spaces, a new trash enclosure screened by landscaping. So the landscaping basically moves from the interior of the parking area out to the perimeter, and a new permeable surface for parking is proposed in the middle of the parking lot. So we've got two separate appeals from separate appellants, and I'll address those as we did in our council agenda report individually. So this is just kind of summarizing Ms. Gott's appeal issues, and they're all issues that are relevant to the approval of a parking modification and a coastal development permit. She's concerned that the project is underparked and doesn't provide a commercial loading zone on site that could cause that to happen out in the street. She asserts the zoning ordinance does not provide for valet parking. And in the Planning Commission's conditions of approval, there was a condition to allow the Public Works Director to permit valet, or she thinks it means you can the Public Works Director could permit valet parking in key public access areas, but that was not the intention of the condition. Another condition regarding the Public Works Department staff approving changes to the valet operations. A concern about the adjacent restaurant facing Cabrillo Boulevard, 29 East Cabrillo, was only required to provide an old non-conforming number of spaces consistent with when the building was originally built, and that there are no bus services late at night, and alternative transportation is problematic, especially for employees who might not be able to afford some of the alternative transportations. These are all things that staff looked at pretty carefully in the development application review time. We did look at all these, and we drafted the conditions of approval. Whatever the Public Works Director approves with regard to valet parking would have to be consistent with the coastal program and city ordinances. And the Public Works Department staff ability to approve changes to valet operations, that was intended to kind of tweak things as they actually become operational and we see how everything's functioning. We can make adjustments to make the valet operations work better, not to do anything to make it not work well. 29 East Cabrillo was, in fact, allowed. It is non-conforming. The property was developed with no on-site parking, and right from the very beginning it had an off-site parking covenant to provide parking spaces that were required by ordinance at the time. So it's still doing that. It's still providing off-site parking that met the requirement that it was constructed under, and it hasn't done anything since to trigger a new parking requirement or additional parking. They've very carefully been constrained in their new development to only do what they can do without triggering extra parking spaces. So the other appeal was from Accessible Santa Barbara, Mr. Railing, Will Railing. And his concerns, the way he wrote his letter was kind of general, and it's a little bit difficult to understand exactly point by point very specific issues because it was pretty general. He's concerned that the project doesn't qualify for an exemption from further environmental review. Staff did look at that and found that it was consistent with the CEQA subsection 15183. That's applicable for projects that are consistent with the 2011 General Plan Environmental Impact Report. That report anticipated future development, given the development potential of the zoning ordinance, et cetera, what kind of development potential each site would have. And the project is within that in terms of its intensification of use. Mr. Railing has been concerned for a while for this project and the project at 29 East Cabrillo that 29 East Cabrillo, the restaurant tenant improvements, didn't get a coastal development permit. And he's presented that case to staff, but staff always found that it could qualify for a coastal development permit, to be exempt from a coastal development permit, and it was, and building permits have been issued, and it's been under construction for a while. The 29 East Cabrillo and 11 Anacapa, they do share parking through a covenant, but they are separate legal entities, different owners. So the city can't require them to combine separate projects into a single project, so they proposed projects separately and applications separately, and the city reviewed them separately. So a lot of this project, we talk a lot about parking because they're requesting a parking modification, and that the parking is really the central issue in the finding to approve a coastal development permit. So the parking requirement, this project, its parking requirement includes all the changes of uses that I described, and it also includes the parking required for the restaurant seating outside and inside. We had some history in planning in the past of only looking at restaurant seating inside, but this project included providing parking for outside restaurant seats. Having said that, the project does not meet the parking requirement. It was built as this old industrial building, and now we've got these newer uses of retail and restaurant that have a more intense parking requirement. And there's just not enough space on the property to provide parking, or at least self-parking, to meet the requirement with the maneuverability so each person can get his car out. There's just not enough physical space to do that. So a parking modification was requested, and even with the parking modification, valet operations were needed to provide the number of parking spaces to meet the parking demand. And the applicant provided a parking demand study, a shared parking demand study, with the key being the way that the uses in the building share parking spaces at different times. Some of the uses are more likely to need parking early in the day, like some of the industrial uses in the building, versus the restaurant, which might be busier in the evenings. So this mix of uses just naturally has times when the parking spaces are able to be shared just because they become available. And the project proposes valet parking, well, in fact, it's required to have valet operations whenever the restaurant is operational in order to meet the demand, when the restaurant demand kicks in, especially at peak times. So the parking requirement by the zoning ordinance is 46 total spaces. And that's just all the requirements for each use added together, with none of that sharing that I was just talking about. Whereas the parking demand looked at that potential for some spaces to be in more demand in the evening versus during the day. Plus, the parking demand study cited the city's Funk Zone access and parking assessment study. And that was a study conducted by City Public Works that looked at, or really surveyed the parking spaces, but the relevant part for this project is that it interviewed people. It had I think they called it an intercept study, where there were people on the street, staff out on the street, intercepting visitors to the Funk Zone and talking to them about how they got there, what mode of travel they used to get to the Funk Zone. They did that over a period of a few days, I believe. And they found that 35% of the respondents, when asked how did they arrive at the Funk Zone, how are they visiting there, 35% had used alternate means other than driving there and parking there to get to the Funk Zone. So the shared parking demand study applied that 35%, assuming, okay, 35% of the people don't need to park because they're not coming here by car. That was factored into the demand study just for the restaurant part of this project. So that is a long-winded description of how we get to the parking demand of 31 spaces as opposed to the zoning parking ordinance requirement of 46. And the project, as proposed, has got 32 spaces total, including when the valet is operational. When the valet, like say early in the morning without valet operations, there's 17 striped spaces for self-parking. And let me just skip to this. This depicts what we were just describing. Let me get back. Okay, so this over to the right side is Anacapa Street, and here's the main driveway coming into the parking lot. And when the valet is not operational, people would come into the parking lot and they could park in these blue spaces. You just come in and pull into these spaces, or come in and pull into these spaces. There's another drive aisle here where 3 of these spaces are available for 11 Anacapa Street. And then when the restaurant opens for business, they would go into valet operation mode, and visitors would come in here and see the valet. This would be the valet attendant area for loading and unloading, and then the valets could stack cars in here. And getting back to that parking agreement for the restaurant facing Cabrillo Boulevard, 29 East Cabrillo, their parking is provided on the 11 Anacapa Street property here. So these tan colored shaded spaces are all dedicated by recorded covenant only for the use of 29 East Cabrillo Boulevard. Now I'll back up a little bit. I may have already described this. The parking's proposed for a shared parking demand study. The zoning ordinance allows a request for a parking modification, but you need to demonstrate you meet parking demand with what you're proposing. I think I covered all this. The valet would be operating during restaurant hours, which we anticipate from 5 p.m. weekdays and opening at 10 a.m. on weekends. They'd be out there operating until closing. And I just mentioned those 3 striped spaces on the adjacent parking lot. over here. These are available at all times for self-parking. I mainly just included this for reference, but this shows that relationship because both appellants have concerns about these two projects and the way they interact. This just kind of shows the properties. The green outlines the 29 East Cabrillo property, and that property line is right up against the back of the building. Its parking is provided on 11 Anacapa along here, and this is the proposed lot to be reconfigured like we described. So to approve a parking modification, the finding, this is a quote right out of the ordinance, that the modification will not be inconsistent with the purposes and intent of the zoning ordinance and will not cause an increase in the demand for parking space or loading space in the immediate area. So it's kind of a double negative, but basically what it's getting to will not cause an increase in the demand for parking or loading space in the immediate area means that that demand for parking is met on-site with on-site parking for the project. And then the required findings to approve the coastal development permit, it has to be found consistent with the California Coastal Act. And then we've cited the most pertinent Coastal Act policy, maintenance and enhancement of public access. And then consistent with the city's local coastal plan, the most relevant policies are, again, same thing, maintenance and enhancement of public access, as well as policy related to non-conforming development. This building does have some non-conforming uses that'll remain and continue there. As those uses, if they are discontinued, then ocean-oriented uses would need to go into the building because it's in the ocean-oriented zone. And then the policy regarding providing adequate off-street parking for new development or substantial redevelopment. Our environmental analysis, I touched on that, how the CEQA exemption, getting to accessible Santa Barbara is concerned about adequate CEQA review. The project is within the scope of future development analyzed with that 2011 environmental impact report for the general plan. Any potentially project-specific impacts are addressed through existing development standards, meaning things like building code. We don't think this project has any really potentially significant project-specific impacts. And staff CEQA analysis supports the finding that the project qualifies for this section 15183 exemption for projects that are consistent with the general plan. So staff's recommendation is that the City Council consider the appeals and the Planning Commission's approval with their conditions. If the Council is able to make all the findings, the appeal should be denied. If the Council is not able to make all the findings, the appeal should be upheld. And we suggest Council direct staff to return with a decision and findings resolution reflecting today's hearing. That concludes my presentation.
Ms. Sneddon has a question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a clarifying question back to the double negative slide, the municipal code slide. I just want to make sure that I understand. If it doesn't cause an increase in the demand for parking, you can have an increased demand for parking, but if it's met on site, then this isn't an issue. It's
That's
just
right.
in the surrounding
That's
area.
right.
And does this include also the businesses on Helena there, like Lighthouse? Does
Yes.
that business use the parking that's in the back there, or can use that as a loading zone? Is it all consistent use?
Mayor, Councilmember Sneddon, that does all those tenants in the building would be in that one parking lot, plus the 3 spaces that we saw next to to the side of the building.
Is that currently true? Like the businesses on the front there could be using the parking that's in the back?
It is, yes.
Oh, I wish I'd known that. Okay. Thank you.
So you're right, the demand for parking does increase quite a bit for this project, but it is met on site according to the parking demand study.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Baumann? We have Commissioner Higgins would be next to make a presentation as a representative from the Planning Commission. I don't see any other questions for Mr. Baumann. So, Mr. Higgins, we want to hear from you how the Planning Commission came to your decision.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members. We had a lengthy hearing on the matter, and we do see parking modification requests on occasion. This one in particular was a little bit different because it did come with a pretty hefty third-party engineering analysis that supported the shared parking use, which is not unusual. So we essentially spoke most of the time we talked about the configuration and how it would work with the accessible parking, but found no issue with the demand or the fact that it was met on site or the loading was met on site.
Are there questions for our representative from the Planning Commission? Okay,
Thank you,
good.
Madam Mayor.
That was good. Okay, so it's time for the appellant. Ms. Scott, come on up. Is Mr. Railing in the room? Anyone else from Accessible Santa Barbara? Okay, so. So whose computer, is someone's computer already plugged in?
I don't know whose that is.
That's mine. Can you let Ms. Scott put hers? Oh, there's two plugs. Okay, very good. So, Ms. Scott, you get 20 minutes, and if you save any for later, you can do that.
Good afternoon, council members. The first thing I'd like to say is I really think our process is broken. Our ordinances need to be fixed, and this is what all of this is about. So the next thing I'd like to just mention to you is that under our local coastal implementation plan, which means Chapter 28, if there is a conflicting permit or a license compared to what is approved by the local coastal plan, it shall be voided. So if you have approved something and it conflicts with the local coastal plan, or if it doesn't actually meet the requirements under Chapter 28, the entire decision can be voided. If you remember, this has really started longer than that. It started in 1970 with someone's decision to go ahead and build a restaurant at 29 East Cabrillo. And there was a 40-year unilateral agreement. That agreement ended well before 2010 because España actually stopped operating, and the agreement doesn't seem to have been transferred to El Torito or the successor companies. I want you to take a look at the first section. In 1970, the parking requirement to be able to build this particular project, meaning 29 East Cabrillo, it needed parking. And that parking was supposed to be for the employees and the customers and the occupant of the residential unit. Can you fit 250 people in 23 vehicles? Because that supposedly is what staff believes the total number of parking places that were provided from Anacapa, 11 Anacapa to 29 East Cabrillo. 23. I don't think that actually fits a 250-seat restaurant. And this is really kind of a conundrum, because what we're saying is that a preliminary building permit or preliminary building application in the 1970s was actually the requirement, and it just simply wasn't. Because a few months after approval, there was another permit for 11 Anacapa. And that permit for 11 Anacapa was for 30 parking stalls. And that was supposed to actually park the España, or the Lobster House, whatever you want to call it, the restaurant at 29 East Cabrillo. So it's kind of interesting. When you start adding it up, that actually ends up being more than 23 parking spaces. And I'd like you to take a look at this particular photo. Do you see what it says up there? It says España parking. So that's 11 Anacapa. We were just there yesterday. It's painted on the side of the building. That parking lot was for the España restaurant. It was not for anybody else. So I want you to think about that. You have a 250-seat restaurant that's supposed to have 23 parking spaces allocated for it along the side of the property line. However, we also now have this parking lot directly in front of it. So we have photos, we have files from the street files that were actually processed for the Lobster House for their parking. Here's a site plan of what that actually looked like. Here is the España. That's where the sign was. This is what it used to look like. Again, 23 parking places versus 53. You can't fit, in the 1970s or even today, 11 people unless you're going to have everyone come by van. So do you really think that there were only 23 parking places that were required for this restaurant? Again, let's talk about the historical agreement. That historical agreement had a 40-year lifetime, okay? But El Chorrito closed in 2015, 5 years after that 40-year unilateral agreement ended. In 2016, there was a rescission and termination of that unilateral agreement. It was a formal process because someone was selling the property. So when that property was purchased, there was no parking agreement. It was gone, if it even was applicable at that time. But in 2018, suddenly there's a covenant for 23 parking places at 29 East Cabrillo, and they say that that is the historical parking requirement for a 250-seat restaurant, and that is going to be parking the entire restaurant. When we have ample evidence that all of the parking in front of 11 Anacapa was actually used for that particular restaurant. Here's that unilateral agreement. It was a 40-year lease. They agreed to actually park the entire project. That's what this agreement was about. It did not state 23 parking spaces. Here's the notice of rescission and termination of the unilateral agreement that happened in 2016. Now I want to just kind of bring you to the Coastal Commission and Coastal Act, You know that Santa Barbara has a certified local coastal plan, right? Do you know what our implementation plan is? Our implementation plan is Chapter 28. I think that we all know right now that we have a new zoning ordinance, Chapter 30, which controls outside of the coastal zone. And that inside of the coastal zone, we're supposed to be following Chapter 28. I think everybody is completely aware of that. But it's kind of strange because while the Coastal Commission adopted a local coastal plan, and that one was from the one that we actually approved in 2018, they just adopted it this summer. I think everyone remembers that, right? Staff would actually have you believe that Chapter 28, we can ignore some changes that they've made and never received approval from the Coastal Commission. Because did you know that whenever you make a change to Chapter 28, that you actually need to get permission from the Coastal Commission to apply those changes to the coastal zone? And so one of the changes has to do with our parking design standards. But as I said, staff actually believes, and I've received a few emails on it, that they don't need coastal, commission approval or an amendment approval if they've made changes to their parking design. I think that's wrong. Chapter 28 actually has a parking design standard that was approved in 1996 by the Coastal Commission. That parking design standard has not been replaced. However, staff would have you believe that it has been, even though there's been no amendment. Chapter 28 does not allow for valet parking. The standards, the city standards for the design from 1982 also doesn't have valet parking. However, in Chapter 30, outside of the coastal zone, you can have valet parking. So this is, again, a problem with processing. You have a staff that is confused as to what is applicable in what zone. You have problems with actually applying the ordinances properly and fairly to all applicants. And we have some people that are pushing the envelope. That's kind of everything that's happened with this project. And it should be denied. And again, the historical parking conundrum. Off-site parking is problematic. Why? Here's a perfect example. 40 years later, we're having a problem with parking because all of the parking wasn't required on site, and we do not have a public parking improvement district in the Funk Zone, and that's really what we need. We need a PBIA in the Funk Zone that has sufficient parking for expansion, because we are not supposed to be allowing our parking facilities in the coast to actually park our commercial businesses. That's supposed to be for people visiting the coast, not going to a restaurant or a bar or a wine bar. They're supposed to be going to the beach. They're supposed to be recreating in our parks, not necessarily only patronizing the Funk Zone. So again, staff, for some reason, still believes the historical agreement is in effect. But that historical agreement has 23 parking spaces and not the entire surface parking for 11 Anacapa. I'm not sure exactly how you can believe that a vehicle can fit 11 people in it, and that someone in the 1970s would agree to that and actually approve it. Today, I can actually see us doing that, but we wouldn't be following the local coastal plan. We wouldn't be following the Coastal Act, and we wouldn't be following our current ordinances under Chapter 28. Oh, and by the way, if that agreement is still in effect and 11 Anacapa is supposed to be providing all of the parking for 29 East Cabrillo, then 15 spaces directly in front of 11 Anacapa need to be used for Oku Restaurant, because they got an exemption for those, 23 parking spaces for those 2 restaurants, and they each divvied up 22 parking spaces between themselves. And they each then couldn't actually have more than a certain number of seats in the restaurant. And for Oku, that was 117. But luckily, I have some photographs, and there's 162 in there, and some of them are in the exit for the fire. So if you actually tried to get from the second floor to the first floor and you're trying to use the fire exit, there's some tables and couches in that little hall. Do you think that actually is a fire hazard? I kind of do. So again, insufficient parking, not only for 29 East Cabrillo, but then we've got insufficient parking for a brand new restaurant that has a huge outdoor patio, an outdoor patio which probably is going to fit about 200 people when you add the indoor and outdoor seats that you can actually put in that particular restaurant when you don't follow the seating plan, which this is all about gaming the system and not following the seating plan. It's about putting the exact number of seats on a plan, getting approval, but then overdeveloping it. And that's really what this is about. And that's what Oku did. And I'm sure that's what the next tenant will do whenever they come in. And you get to decide if you're willing to turn a blind eye to how we calculate parking, how we provide approvals, and we give our public parking away for commercial development to the detriment of our residents and the businesses who actually follow the rules. I think this slide basically says everything. Again, we're not following the rules. We're not following the parking design standards. We've got a problematic system. We have valet services that are supposed to be free. So what happens when the valet ends up parking a vehicle in one of our public parking lots, which they're going to be allowed to do? So they're going to have to pay for that service, so that valet is not going to be free anymore. And those parking lots were not supposed to be used for valet services to park commercial vehicles, vehicles for people who are going to a commercial restaurant. And you can't mitigate for all of the problems with parking for employees. There is none. The shuttles, MTD, stops picking up for many places starting between 9 and 10. This restaurant's going to be open past that time, and they're certainly not going to be able to take people to Ventura, which is where they're going to be living, or Goleta, because they can't afford to live in Santa Barbara. Let's take a look at this slide, which is kind of interesting. The old plan for 1982 says you can't put tandem parking behind ADA. Do you remember you were there yesterday in front of Lovelorn, and you saw all of the things for sale out in the parking lot? Do you think they're going to use outdoor space? Look at that. That's a perfect outdoor space. So they're going to need a coastal development permit for that because they're going to be expanding. And I don't think that they're going to be able to get that. And you actually didn't see all of this, but maybe you've been down on Helena. Pretty much any day of the week, you can find vehicles that have been cornered off behind all of this junk so that the occupants of 11 Anacapa can have parking. But you know, those are public parking spaces. So that tells you how desperate people are to find parking. And that gives a little bit more evidence that there isn't enough parking in that area, and there certainly won't be enough parking for those employees. Thank you.
You have 1 minute, 24 seconds left. Ms. Gott, I think Ms. Sneddon has a question for you. Oh, no. Okay. Are there any questions for the appellant? No. Thank you then. A question for our city attorney. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm having a hard time myself deciphering whether we're supposed to be using these 1982 standards or the modern standards. That seems like a legal question. Can you advise us?
Sure, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Sneddon. As you know, we maintain a bit of a division in our office between the lawyers representing the department and myself representing the council. We received correspondence raising these issues from Ms. Gott in the last 48 hours, and we've addressed it. The short answer is that the Coastal Commission staff was quite clear with our staff that it was not interested in approving the parking standards at that level of detail. The coastal policies are higher flying, you might say, meaning more general. There's actually a section of the Coastal Act that I want to call your attention to. If you'll give me 1 moment, I will get that.
Sure.
I'll do it this way. It's 30,523, if I remember correctly. And the point of that section is that it specifies a limited level of detail to be provided in the LCP. So staff's position is that the parking standards they applied were authorized by the council in, I believe, June of 2018. Ms. Ostranger may want to add what she has advised the staff. Mayor and Councilmember Sneddon.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Madam Mayor, Council Members, Sneddon. Yes, I advise the staff that not every regulation or standard that's applied to a project in the coastal zone is incorporated into our implementation plan or part of our LCP. The minor exceptions, as Mr. Kalan noted, are not required to be approved by the Coastal Commission, nor do they necessarily want to approve those. They leave those to the discretion of the city. And I would point the council to Title 28, Section 28.90.045, which provides that the current city standard for parking design as prepared by the transportation engineer and as held on file by the Public Works Director is applied to the project. So in this case, the plain language of the statute indicates that it was intended that we be able to prepare and update these parking design standards by the transportation engineer. And that was what was done in June of 2018 and approved by the council on that date.
Thank you. I have two further questions, if I may. Where do valet parkers park the vehicles? I don't know who answers that question, but is it all within the
Mr.
parking
Baumann
lot?
has an answer on that one. Okay.
Mayor Maria, Councilmember Sneddon, this is like a colorized version of the site plan that shows the valet parkers, the valet guys, the valet operators would be able to use all these blue or red spaces, except for these over here, which are always just available for self-parking.
So
This whole lot would be valet operations when the restaurant's open and the valet's operating.
Thank you. And so we're not expecting any valet parking off-site impacting other public spaces?
That's clearly prohibited. I mean, and that wouldn't be consistent with the findings for the mod or the findings for the CDP. So they're designed this very carefully to make sure that this parking lot can handle everything on site.
Thank you for clarifying that again. And then for the public parking in the front there I've seen that myself on Helena, that it's blocked off and cars are parked there. Is that by choice? They could be parking in the back, but they're choosing to park in front? Or is that, maybe that's beyond the scope of our discussion today, but there does seem to be impacted parking on Helena. Is that parking that could be in the back?
Mayor Murillo and Councilmember Sneddon, yes, that is public right-of-way and should be available to the public, and if they're parking there, it's just a choice.
Thank you.
More?
Yes, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Sneddon, I wanted to call the council's attention to the specific condition that Mr. Bauman's speaking about on page 3 of attachment 5, which are the Planning Commission's resolution. Under valet operation, it clearly prohibits the use of public streets, alleys, or city-owned parking facilities unless the Public Works Director were to approve it. And from a drafting standpoint, we would include that authority in the event council policies change or circumstances change, so that we wouldn't need to come back for a public hearing for what should be an operational detail.
Okay. That closes the appellant part, and we go to presentation from the applicant. You're already plugged in there, I think. And whenever you're ready, I'll start the clock. Remember, you can save a little bit at the end if you want.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I'm Jarrett Gorin from Vanguard Planning, and I represent the property owner, Hannah Beach, LLC. I think your staff did a great job, itemized their responses to everything in these appeals. It's a little confusing. These appeals they throw up an overwhelming amount of claims. It's like a maelstrom of claims. A lot of them sound like conspiracy theories. I mean, it's really hard to get through this stuff. And I think your staff did an excellent job addressing everything. So I'm not going to be redundant to your staff report. I think they've covered things. I am going to cover a couple more things in a little bit more detail. So first off, let's start with this. 23 and 29 East Cabrillo, why are we talking about it so much? This isn't our project. This is a project that's next door on Cabrillo Street. And it was surprising to me to read so much about this project in these appeals. It's an approved and constructed project. It's operational. Oku is in business right now, and the restaurant next door, Flor de Maíz, is going to open next week, I believe. There's their hiring sign that's up there. A lot of the things in these appeals make a lot of claims like, wow, this was all done, illegally somehow, and how many people could fit in a car, etc. The simple answer is that the city approved that project with this parking spaces that it still has right now today. If you go back, I didn't have these in my slides, but if you go and look at the actual building permit and occupancy certificate, it was approved with 16 parking spaces, and it says it has 23 off-site, which are the 23 it still has off-site. So all these things about parking agreements and did they expire and did 11 people fit in a car, all of this stuff, it really doesn't, it's irrelevant because that's how the project was approved. And the way nonconformities work is if you have nonconforming to standards of the zoning ordinance, they stay in place. They don't have to do with when an agreement was in place or not. If this restaurant didn't have these spaces and it provided spaces on another property that gave them the spaces, that would be fine too. So what I want to cover here is that all of these allegations of, oh, this is inconsistent with the Coastal Act, et cetera. Well, let's see what the Coastal Commission had to say about it. Staff was really careful with this thing on Cabrillo, and they talked a lot with Coastal Commission staff about it. They specifically contacted Coastal Commission staff about this project, and here's the letter they sent. This was back in August 2018. That's Megan Sinkula. She's great staff that we talked to a lot at the Coastal Commission. And I'm not going to read this whole letter to you, but there's some relevant things here in this letter. Where's my little pointer coming up? Hang on a second. All right. Technical difficulties. There we go. So you can see here staff's talking about the fact that they are not increasing beyond the 250 seats, and they're saying right there, look at that, 22 parking spaces on the adjacent parcel, 11 Anacapa. And this was explicitly brought to the attention of the Coastal Commission staff, telling them this is what we're doing. And then if you get down here to the final paragraph on it, there's the punchline. The analysis by your city staff, which was the correct analysis, is that that project at Cabrillo doesn't change the intensity of use there. The amount of parking spaces it was approved to serve it, still serve it, and that's how it's able to be approved, and that's how it was approved. And the Coastal Commission never said, wait a minute, that's wrong, we don't agree with that. They said, we don't have a comment on that. So I think for clarity's sake, let's take this off the table and talk about what our actual project is. So parking's the biggest deal with this project. And here's the site plan. Just for reference here, these are the parking spaces which are under agreement to the Cabrillo project. And, again, to be clear, these spaces aren't being double counted. They're not being used for 11 Anacapa. The spaces on 11 Anacapa, maybe the restaurant had those as extra spaces, but they weren't required to have them. And the fact that they had their name painted on the building doesn't somehow change that. These are the spaces they're required to have, and these are the spaces they still have. So we're going to be talking about this stuff in purple here. These are the spaces that go with 11 Anacapa. And we're only talking about these spaces. And what we're looking at here is, do the package of uses in the 11 Anacapa building line up with the demand and the number of spaces that we have to provide parking? And the main way that we're going to be doing that is through valet operation. This is the final adopted condition from the Planning Commission. And we talked about this condition a lot and the wording of it a lot and what hours it would apply, et cetera. But this is what we ended up with. And I think the language that we ended up with is really good. And the basic premise here is if that restaurant's in operation, there's a valet. Okay? We didn't want to, it was originally like people talked about, do we put times on it? Do we have days of the week? We just said, no, if the restaurant's open in operation, you've got a valet because that's what's generating the highest demand for parking. So that's what this condition says. The other thing it says is that the valet parking is free of charge. That's written into the conditions. And again, this appellant likes to say, well, what if they don't? And what if people start doing something else? Then it will be different. Well, they're in violation of their conditions if that happens, and the city can enforce against them. So these are the conditions. This is what's going to apply. And again, when you read these appeals, it's as if, valet parking, that's this unique privilege that somehow this project's getting special treatment, or it's this, this wacky, untried concept. It's not. It's just parking. Valet parking is just another type of parking. It's another way that you can meet your parking demand on the site. And that's one of the ways that we're doing it in this project. So these are our parking spaces. The ones that I've got highlighted in green here are available when there's no valet in operation. So I'm going to go over this. Basically, anybody can pull in here anytime and pull in these spaces when the restaurant's not operating. Okay, so we have this parking study that Associated Transportation Engineers did. They work for applicants. They work for municipalities. They're an incredibly well-respected traffic engineering firm. And what they do is they look at parking demand rates from ITE. And ITE goes all over the country and in Southern California and sees how many cars actually park for different types of uses versus what an ordinance might say. And in a lot of cases, what the ordinance says is more parking than you actually need to meet the demand. So they put all of this together and come up with parking demand. And in this case, we've got even more specific data from our own transportation division that went out and interviewed hundreds of people to see how they were getting to the funk zone. So all of that data is taken into account here. And this is probably, if you don't read anything else in the report, read this. These are the demand numbers that they came up with. What I've got highlighted here is the things except the restaurant, because again, if the restaurant's open, you've got a valet. So we're going to look at what's the demand when there is no valet there. So these are the numbers we have, and we've got 17 spaces available. And if you look at the peak parking demand, on the weekdays, we need 8, and on the weekends, we need 6. So we have more than enough to accommodate there. And again, these demand numbers take into account employees as well. They don't differentiate between, is this a customer or an employee or a service person? Demand is demand as far as this data goes. So when the restaurant is operating, all of this becomes valet. And we've got 32 spaces available. And based on the demand study, these are our numbers. So the peak is actually on a weekday because you've got the restaurant and retail going, whereas on the weekend, some of that retail workshop isn't operating. So if we look at that, total spaces are 32. We've got the highest parking demand is 31 on a weekday, and then on the weekend, that goes down to 28. So in every case, we've got enough parking on site to meet the demand. Now, a question that has come up is, how does this accessible parking thing work? And, these 1982 parking design standards, those don't apply. What applies is the Americans with Disabilities Act, and that's a building code thing, and that's building code's updated every 3 years. So we have to be current with the current building code, which is the 2016 code, and then it's going to change in January to the 2019. But here's how this works. These are our accessible spaces here, and if somebody shows up in an accessible van and doesn't want the valet to park their van, the valet will move this car and they can park their own van. And then when they want to leave, the valet moves this car and they pull their van out, or they can give their van to the valet and they can park it. But these accessible spaces are always available. Transportation approved this, the building department approved this. And the accessible spaces, to be clear, they can't be used by the valet to park other cars. They can't park my car in there. So if there's no accessible cars in the lot at all, then those spaces are vacant. So they're always available for accessible parking. So let's talk about accessibility. One appeal was filed by Accessible Santa Barbara, and the appeal doesn't mention anything about accessibility in it, which is, I don't know, I think that's strange. It's of note. In any case, on accessibility, this is our site plan here. We're making huge accessibility improvements. The property has 0 accessibility on it right now, and that's where our spaces are. And then these spaces connect through to everything. And Tony sort of showed this, and I'll show it in my other more colorful way, but here's our spaces, and these are the paths to travel. And so this is providing a path all the way from Anacapa through to Helena. This goes from the spaces all the way into this lobby, which provides access inside the building to every single space in this building. And then we've got another one over here, which picks up from the street and gives you an accessible path to travel all the way up to here. So we're vastly improving the situation for accessibility over here. On the Helena side, we can't really provide direct access over there because of the grade difference. The floor of this building is up above the street, so we're getting that accessibility from the other side, which is where we can do it. So we don't just say this works. California accessibility specialist says it works. The building department even will rely on these people instead of their own staff if you have one of them. And we had a whole report done and certified for this project, and the building departments reviewed it, and they say that they concur this all works because it does. So neighborhood-wise, here we are, and that's the Garden Street parking lot. This is the project across the street from us where Brass Bear is, and they just recently completed a major ADA improvement that gives access from that Garden Street lot through to Anacapa. And ours provides another link between Anacapa and Helena. So it's really increased opportunities for accessible access in this whole neighborhood here. Finally, what I think is really cool about this project is it's renovating, but it's still preserving the funk of the building. Somebody said in our last hearing, this is the funkiest of the funk zone. And I kind of agree with that the more time I spend out there. So here's that same aerial. And then we're going to update the north and east elevations. So Tony showed you this. This whole part here is still pretty much the way it is now. And then this area here where the restaurant is would be updated a little bit. And then over on the north elevation, we're going to do some upgrades. That's where that new path of travel goes through. But the west elevation here, this is the really unique elevation that has that character. And that's pretty much staying the way it is. And I think it's cool that a project can incorporate that and upgrade two other sides. The one on the driveway side it's not changing either, but it's ugly. I'm not putting it in my slides. So anyway, that's the project. This is consistent with things. We did a lot of work up front to make sure that it was before investing thousands of dollars pursuing this. If the valet parking was not going to work or was going to be inconsistent with the Coastal Act, this thing would have been dead on arrival, and there's no way we would have even pursued it. But we vetted this out up front. Staff spent a really long time looking at it. They talked to the Coastal Commission staff, and this is consistent, regardless of whatever conspiracy theories other people put forward. So that'll end my presentation. I can answer any questions you have.
Ms. Snedden.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Will the current tenants be staying in the front of the building here, or will there be any changes?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Snedden, I'm glad you asked that. Yeah, the current tenants are staying in place. And one thing I'd bring up about that, there are structural upgrades also required as part of the building permit requirements, which aren't even things we usually talk about here. But those have been designed so that the critical improvements can be made without having to displace tenants. And then there's an additional plan as tenants vacate on their own to go in and do some supplemental upgrades in those spaces. But the owner of the property, it's really important to him to protect the local tenants and the tenants that he has. And so that was a design criteria at the outset of this project.
Excellent. Thank you.
I don't see any other lights, Mr. Gorin. So you have 5 minutes and 44 seconds in reserve.
Thank you.
Thanks. And is Mr. Railing here? Anybody from Accessible Santa Barbara? Okay. So we'll close that section and go to public comment. Everyone has 3 minutes. If you can be more concise than 3 minutes, we would be grateful. Michael Miranda, you're going to be first. And after Michael, Thomas Gallio, Matt Labrie, John Tyne. Welcome.
Madam Mayor, City Council members, I have known Ray Mahoob for 20 years, and I used to see him every day when I had my fish tank at Starbucks in De La Guerra, and for about 3 years. And I will have to state that he is interested in the vibrancy and the health of the community. And so for that reason alone, I support this project, because he's an astute businessman. He would not go into this if there was a real parking problem. It just doesn't make any sense. And and I've also spoken to residents that live in the area, and they support the project. So if there are any parking problems that do arrive, I'm sure they can be creative solutions to solve them. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Mr. Gallio? And please correct my pronunciation.
No, that's perfect.
Oh, good.
Madam Mayor, City Council, I've been here since 1969, and I witnessed the España restaurant being built.
Speak right into the microphone.
Okay. I was here in 1969 and witnessed the España restaurant being built, and it wouldn't have been built unless the Castagnola brothers took a section of 11 Anacapa down to accommodate all those extra parking spots that were necessary for them to have a restaurant and replace the España restaurant and replace the Vet Center that was there for all those years. It would have never been built had George Castagnola not supplied all those parking spots on the backside of 11 Anacapa. And the millions of dollars that the Castagnola family have supplied the city with taxes over the 50 years they operated there would have never existed, and we wouldn't have had the España restaurant. Ray McBoob is trying his best to comply with all the regulations, necessary for him to change the España, which was a sow's ear, into a silk purse now. There was very little construction put into the España restaurant. It had no ventilation, and it deteriorated after 15 years, and the locals abandoned the España restaurant. And it hasn't been since Ray McBoob, took over all 3 properties to move forward and get these little jewels built. Michael Rosenfeld spent, the whole project took 24 years to get the California Hotel built. What's going on? Give Ray the respect he deserves and move forward and get these projects done and take these old warehouses, these tin shacks that are ugly down on Helena Street. Get rid of all of them. Build the jewels that the developers and the landlords want to put there, and help them. I have nothing more to say. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Matt Labrie. He had to go, I guess. Deny appeal is his message. John Tyne. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, City Council members. My name is John Tyne. I am an attorney here in town. I do represent the applicant. And I think that one thing of particular note here is that the Planning Commission has approved this project 6-0. And I was at that hearing, and I will tell you that the overwhelming community support for this project and the gratitude and the respect for the fact that the owner has really paid particular attention to preserve the character of the neighborhood, to increase accessibility for the neighborhood, and to elevate this building was well received. From a legal perspective, I look at the appellant's arguments and I say that the staff is correct. If you find that you can reach the findings that you're being asked to reach with regard to the on-site parking here, then you ought to deny the appeal and you ought to approve the project. And I listened to her presentation and I saw nothing related to 11 Anacapa Street that would give rise to you not making the requisite findings that would lead you to deny the appeal. And my hope for you or for the community is that you will do so unanimously in the manner that the Planning Commission did, because great lengths have been gone to ensure that this project is complicit and that this project will be a benefit to our entire community, particularly, ironically, the community that requires accessibility. As you saw with Mr. Gorin, we have improved accessibility from the Garden Street lot all the way to Helena Street now with this project. And if you do make the requisite findings and you do deny the appeal, then we will be able to deliver that to our community. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Dina Murillo, my cousin. She's not here. Okay. Ken Snitker, and tell me how you say your name. You'll be followed by Ken Reif, or Rifey, Raphael Carrillo, John DeWild.
My name is Ken Switzer.
Switzer.
That's right. And I'm a 32-year local resident, of which 20 years I've lived just a few blocks away at West Beach. So I'm very familiar with the area, and I love the area, respect it, and I'm in favor of what's being proposed. And it really is pretty simple. It's just compartmentalizing to this project and nothing else, and it's a parking modification. in exchange for wonderful improvements that everybody wants while preserving character. And it's not a density modification, it's not a setback modification, it's a parking modification that still satisfies the demand by experts. These aren't political hacks that are doing these studies. These are experts. These are scientists that do these studies. It's still meeting that demand. And it seems, if anything, parking and transportation technology trends are going to less and less car parking and transportation. So I don't see it going anywhere but better in the future, too. I see no reason not to deny the appeal and approve the project. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Reif?
Hi, Madam Mayor. Sorry, public speaking is not my forte, but thank you for allowing us to be here. I wanted to thank you for this. I found this last week when I was pulling a permit. It's a sustainable progress report, and this makes me proud to be in Santa Barbara. The fact that you take the time to put something like this, and I'm not patronizing. I can't tell you how happy I was to see this. It means that you care about our community and what it's going to be for our kids. I've been a single parent and full-time parent, and my kid is everything. And I want his Santa Barbara to be beautiful. From the day that I met Ray Mahboob, everything he has always said and I have seen has been inspirational. He is a man with integrity. His family has integrity. And I support his project for quite a few reasons. One of all is that building it should be a historical building. It's a beautiful building. He's not changing it much. Two, I think the parking issue, though I'm not educated like all the rest of these people, seems petty when I think that this sustainability progress report stands for our care for our environment. Why do we want to increase parking? Why aren't we focused on public transportation? The first time I ever heard of Uber was actually from Ray. He's like, isn't this an amazing concept? True story. These people are going out to dine. My son rides his bicycle from City College to San Roque every day. I don't like drinking and driving. People shouldn't drink and drive. We all know what everybody's doing to function. I don't think we should be so worried about parking lots and stopping progress. The word progress is right here. I think we should help people who are beautifying our town, and I think that we should help with progress and stop creating more and more red tape and nitpicking people who are doing positive things. And I think that rather than parking lots, I hope that we support more and more public transportation. I praise Uber and Lyft and all the taxi people, and I hope that we switch our focus. Thank you very much. Public transportation, not more parking. Thank you.
Thank you. Rafael Carrillo, are you still here? Oh, that was you? You're Rafael Carrillo? Yes, I am. So Mr. Reif wasn't here? He left. Okay, so do you got that? That wasn't Mr. Reif. Okay, sorry. John DeWild, you're next. Also left? Yeah, just Len Germano, or Hermano, Brad Froling, Susan Rodriguez, Wallace Diet. Is that another slip? That'll be the last one. We're not accepting speaking slips after that one. Go. Are you, sorry, are you Len?
Len, yeah. Len
How do you
Germano.
Say your last name?
Germano.
All right, Germano.
German
Go ahead.
with an O, yeah.
Go ahead, please.
Well, thank you for having me today. I'm actually one of the business owners in that building, and I'm definitely for the project. I support it 110%. You know, I just want to address the fact that majority of the people that tend to come into my space, my business, they're not parking. They're actually utilizing Uber and coming in with public transportation and biking. I would say 90%. There's a very small, minute that might occasionally park their car, but they're not staying very long. It's kind of an in and out thing, 10 minutes at most, not sticking around to enjoy the funk zone. So maybe running an errand or something like that. But Ray's been amazing. He's been taking care of that whole zone. I mean, just in general, anything that I specifically need, he's on it. So there's great communication there, and he's been nothing but great. So I just want to, he's got my support 110%, and let's make this happen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Mr. Furling couldn't stay, but he said support parking, an old building of character. Okay. Not sure. Susan Rodriguez? Welcome.
Thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'm Susan Rodriguez, and I'm supporting the project at 11 Anacapa. I've lived here for 40 years. I've seen many, many changes. Much of it down in that area was an area I would never take my children to back in the day. I've seen so many improvements. What I appreciate about the project is keeping the vitality of the building, but improving it, adding beauty to the building, updating it to ADA compliant, and I really like valet parking, so let's do it. So thank you very much.
All right, thanks for your brevity. Wallace Diet, followed by Vanessa Olmos.
My name is Wallace Pyatt. That's cool.
That's a P, okay, Pyatt.
That's cool. I am a tenant with Jill Johnson at 11 Anacapa. I own Rodeo Gallery and Lovewarn Clothing, and I am completely for this project. Number one, Ray has not only become a friend, but he's become an advocate of the arts. He kicked my butt to open this gallery and make it a kind of a creative scene down there, and I call it the Creative Island. I have tons of people going through the gallery and our store, from Europe to locals from all around the world, saying, oh my God, this building is the coolest building, your gallery is the coolest gallery, and Lovewarn is such a great store, and it's so creative, and that building seethes creativity. And I believe in this project, and I think we need to keep it funky down there, just like he said, and but clean it up and make it accessible to all walks of life. And I'm for this project. And thank you, Ray, for making me open that gallery. Thanks.
Okay. Ms. Olmos, are you here?
Hello, Madam Mayor and members of the council. My name is Vanessa, and I am in support of this project. I have always fully supported any project that Ray Mahmood has worked on, and clearly has always improved our community, especially in regard to this project. At the moment, the warehouses that are there definitely could use some visual improvement, and I'm always a supporter of using real estate to its full advantage. So I support seeing this building improved and keeping the funkiness that it originally has, with better accessibility for the community and everyone involved. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Naren Porter Hashadi. Had to go. Jill Johnson next, followed by Aaron Running, Ollie Allstrand. Welcome.
Hello. I'm Jill, and I'm the other owner of Lovewarn. And I am ecstatic about this whole proposal. I'm down there every single day, so I know what the parking is like, and it's ample as it is. And I agree with Lenny. A lot of people, they take the train up, they're Ubering, they're not drinking and driving. You don't do it like people did it in the 70s probably. So I don't feel like, I'm not worried about the parking at all. And I think the improvements that they're proposing, I am very, very welcome to have that, because I like the accessibility issues. I like that they're going to be beautifying the parking lot and the landscaping. And obviously because my heart's in that building, I really would love to see it saved. People love it. I can't tell you how many people come in, photograph, my Funk and Love signs, and how many photo shoots are done on the other side of the building with all the other businesses. And all of us that occupy the building now, I feel like Ray has always been very supportive to us, and it's local, interesting businesses in that building. And tourists come there, they're happy to see something that's not a chain store, that's got a lot of special qualities and artistic flair. So, I support this 100% too. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Running? Ollie Allstrand, Christian Sagashmi after him. Welcome.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. I'm Aaron Running. I'm the owner of Copenhagen Sausage Garden, and I am the future owner of the Santa Barbara Beer Garden here at 11 Anacapa. I appreciate you guys taking the time to look at this project. Really, the reason I could have chosen a bunch of different locations in the Funk Zone, but Ray brought his vision to me, and he's really brought me along. He has a great team behind him. Obviously, he has all this support, and it's a testament that I made the right decision, even though it's taken a little bit longer than we all hope. I've invested $300,000 in the project so far. I'm ready to invest more and bring the funk back to the Funk Zone. Thanks.
All right, thanks. Ollie Allstrand, Kristen Sagashmi, Cybel Israel, Mitch Stark. Welcome.
Hello. Hi, my name is Ali Allstrand. I'm here to oppose the appeal for this particular project because I do not feel it's right. I wanted to share my experience with you as a restaurateur. And when it comes to parking, really parking is not one of our problems. And with this particular number of parking allocated, I think it's more than sufficient to house a very significant restaurant. And a lot of questions came up about peak hours. I think that was the question. And for restaurants, when we talk about peak hours, is the addition tourists that come in from hotels, from other places that are passing by. And during that time, a lot of the customers usually walk to the restaurant, and they don't usually take their cars because it's such a close by, such a nice area to walk, it's such a nice weather in Santa Barbara. So during the peak hours when we are talking about, most of it is that extra addition customers from out of town that would want to walk in, and if they're far away, they usually take Uber or Lyft or share rides. And then the other locals, usually the peak hours, again, I want to say Thursday, Friday, and a lot of people work in downtown, and so that during peak hour we're talking about, they usually walk down to a particular restaurant for happy hour or get together, and really there's not much of a need for parking at that during the peak hours we're talking about. And then there was another mention of employee parking. Yeah, this is more than sufficient for employees parking because there are not that many employees that actually have a car. Most of them do have bicycles, or most of them are getting picked up by a friend or dropped off by a friend. And so I really do not see parking being one of the big problems. And in this case, I do object to the appeal and support of the project. Thank you for your time.
Thanks. Christian Sagashmi? Had to go, but the message is I oppose the appeal. Ms. Israel? Come on up. Mitch Stark after you. Travis Hawley. Then Jason Yeager. Welcome.
Madam Mayor and council members, my name is Cybel Israel. I'm a residential and commercial broker associate with Douglas Elliman. I've known Ray Mahboob for a number of years, and he's fantastic to work with, someone of high ethics and morals and values. And I say that because it's not everyone that wants to take on a project like this. And I think that's an important point here. Because he's doing something for our community, and by this recent appeals standards, if that were to have been presented to Brian Kelly, who helped to jumpstart the revitalization of the Funk Zone, then maybe we would not even have the Funk Zone be as it is today, and that would be a huge loss, because without conflict, there is no change. Without change, there is no growth. And it takes people who have vision, like Brian Kelly, like Ray Mahboob, and go out of their way to take the time and spend the money and do things to revitalize our community. The other point that I want to make is, at a time when there are so many separate discussions about revitalization to the downtown area by facilitating the permitting process by reducing parking regulations as a possibility, this appeal seems counterintuitive and outdated. Also, other communities that are revitalizing their downtown areas are actually converting parking into mixed use, et cetera, and they're encouraging public transportation using Uber and Lyft. So free valet parking is providing a resolution for any potential parking congestions, but as was mentioned, 35% of the potential patrons won't actually even need parking. So the other thing is that Ray or anyone else could certainly just promote leveling the property and starting over, and it's not everyone that wants to take on a really, a property that has so much character and will continue to encourage the character of the Funk Zone and take it on and restore it, because that's sometimes a harder job. So anyway, I'm for this and encourage denying the appeal. Thank you.
Mr. Stark, still here? Mr. Hawley, after you.
Hi, Madam Mayor and council members. Thanks for letting me come up. I just wanted to say I've been involved in this project. I'm a commercial real estate broker here in Santa Barbara since 1995. I've been involved with this project for the last 3 years. And I know the whole team's been wanting to do it the right way, from the architects to the planners to the landlord to the tenant. Their heart is to do it the right way, and they've met, I think, every criteria that the Planning Commission and the staff has imposed upon them. I think they really care about doing the right thing and doing a great job to help benefit the Funk Zone. And I think it's really crucial to the city of Santa Barbara that the Funk Zone continues to evolve into a vibrant place, because really it's the shining star of our city. It's where a lot of the tourists want to come and start their day, end their day, have part of their day there. And we need to allow for changes of uses where parking is amply provided to be approved. And really, at the end of the day, this is about a change of use. It's not really about parking. Parking is just a function of that. But we need to be able to change uses of existing properties to the new uses that the Funk Zone's all about and allow for that. This project has the best parking in the Funk Zone by far. There's a lot of other projects in the Funk Zone that have zero parking with similar uses. And the applicant should not be punished for that. He's provided and demonstrated that he's going to be able to provide great parking as it is. And I really hope you approve the project. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Travis Hawley. Welcome.
Madam Mayor, City Council, thank you. I'd like to reiterate a lot of what's been said already. I think it's important to preserve the historical nature of buildings in the Funk Zone. It is a big draw for the community. I am a local resident, a local business owner. The business I own happens to be the valet parking company that provides service currently for both locations being discussed today. So in reiterating all the things everybody else has said here today, I can also add that it is just absolutely erroneous that the parking is not sufficient. The parking is more than sufficient. As was just mentioned, throughout the Funk Zone, parking has been an issue in terms of space and allocation. This location exceeds every location I can think of in the Funk Zone, and I know them all pretty well related to parking specifically. I would just like to point out that in one of the items that I heard as a component of the appeal was a fascination with numbers on spaces versus occupants versus restaurant seats. Again, I can say from being in current operation now for Oku, very successfully, and future operation for the new development. There is more space than is needed for every patron of the restaurant, for every beachgoer. They're not separate entities, by the way. When we talk about people coming down and being tourists and seeing the downtown area, going to the beach, etc., they're not an isolated group of people who don't eat sushi or don't drink beer. They do all of those things. They park with us, they eat, they visit the beach, they visit the local area, they spend their money downtown. Everything about this project is great. It's preserving some historical elements of the city that I think we can all agree are important to preserve. It's bringing us forward into the future with new elements and items that we can all enjoy. And further, the bottom line is that there's just nothing valid about the idea that there's not sufficient space for this parking. There is more than sufficient space. We're proving that every day since Oku opened its doors, and we'll continue to do that with your support in approving this and denying the appeal. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Jaeger, are you still here? I saw him earlier. Hal Conklin, next. Doss Williams, Rochelle, and then Adam Perozzi is the last one. Welcome.
Madam Mayor, members of council, I heard a lot about numbers today, and I hate to admit how old I am, but I was here when the Coastal Act was passed, when the redevelopment agency was actually put into place. And if there's anything I know over that period of time is that things do change. And in fact, the things that we think are important at one point in time maybe not be a decade later. The thing I really wanted to just say today is I wanted to compliment the staff. I don't always compliment the staff, but I want to say that I think they did a fantastic job of really applying the art of compromise. That's the sort of basic definition of politics, but in this case, it really is a balancing act of how you take this sort of historic elements of what you have to deal with and put them into play in a way that really provides not only for today, but for the future. And I think that what they came up with is a tremendous balancing act. And so my compliments to everyone for making that happen.
Very good. Mr. Williams?
Well, I too, being in this room makes me very nostalgic. It makes me feel like I'm still in my 30s because I spent a lot of those 30s here. Just brings back a lot of great memories to see that seal and to see your faces and know what a great council we've got. I think it's always important to look at these from a big picture standpoint, and most of the council, in fact, 6 out of the 7 of you have overlapping constituents with me. So I hear and talk with them often, and one of their great concerns, of course, is the future of retail and commerce in the downtown area. And we as a council faced a real tough decision a number of years ago. The only one in the room that was there at the time was this guy. And that decision was, do we initiate some LCP amendments in the area of the Funk Zone to allow more business vitality? And I, like most Santa Barbarans, am completely double-minded about this, right? I liked the old Funk Zone because I like to be able to take my surfboard down to surfboard repair. But I also like the new Funk Zone. And thank God we have it right now because it's buzzing with activity and jobs and life. This is a great project where you don't have to choose between the old Funk Zone and the new Funk Zone. You can have both. And I really think that's a rare opportunity. It's an opportunity that all you need to accept to have both the new and old Funk Zone in this project is a parking mod. And a parking mod that still fulfills the parking demand. And here I'll go back to the big picture. Parking orthodoxy is the enemy of progress in this community and throughout the state. Parking orthodoxy is the enemy of being able to house our people affordably. Parking orthodoxy is the enemy of being able to have good commercial and good jobs in this community. And so it shouldn't matter if we're meeting the parking demand, it shouldn't matter whether it's done in the traditional manner or whether it's done with valet or I would even say with lifts or with other things, as long as the parking demand is being made and we use the space, the precious space that we have here in our community well. So with that, I just want to support the project and urge the denial of the appeal.
Thank you, Supervisor Williams. Rochelle? Welcome.
Hello, everybody. My name's Rochelle, and I met Ray about 2 years ago. I am an entrepreneur, so I'm in the process of launching my first business. And I met Ray, and I kind of told him about what I was doing, and he's connected me with people that have made a huge positive impact on where my business is today and also my personal development. So I haven't launched yet, and I actually reached out to him a couple weeks ago. I was like, Ray, I'm interning for this VC in town. I'm also consulting for another pet product company in town, but I need more money because, as we all know, Santa Barbara is like an arm and a leg to live here. So one of the things that I heard was about the employees that are going to be parking at that space. So me as a server, that's what I'm going to be doing at night. I always walk just because I can't afford gas. So as a server, I just feel like having restaurants where servers can make a lot of money to be able to afford to live here is not only imperative, but I feel like it also brings the community together because we all walk home together. So for example, I live on Haley and Garden. So if this project was approved, I could easily walk to work and walk back without having to worry about parking. It helps me. I know a couple of other people that are trying to apply there and get the job, and the approval of this project not only makes a positive impact for our community, but also the young entrepreneurs or young college students that are trying to make it. Also, I'm reading a book right now called Embracing Discomfort. And, as the previous gentleman up here, he was talking about how sometimes change can be scary, but the animals that don't evolve are actually the ones that die. So when I was listening to, I don't know what her name is, but when she was talking about all of these problems, it was like, what if this and what if that? And it was just like fear, fear, fear. And it just didn't seem like any of those points had relevance. But when you look at pretty much everyone in this room, I would say, has had a positive impact from Ray and could positively benefit from this project. So I ask you today to not let fear drive your decision, but let love drive your decision. Thank you.
Nice, thank you. Is Adam Perosi here? I don't know if you can top that, Adam.
I surely can't. I didn't plan to speak today. I was actually at the office watching this. Madam Council, thank you for letting us speak. Seriously, thank you for letting us speak. I think that's why we're here today, is because we're allowed to speak. And, Ray aside, people talk about how good Ray is. We're talking about parking. But what we're really talking about in my mind is a loophole or just one fact to kill a deal, kill something moving forward, progress, love, right? And so parking becomes the excuse. And I got something to say about it. Is she here still? So I've never met you.
You should address your comments.
Sorry.
Thank you.
So if you got a reason to kill something, you got to do it, right? And so I ask, we take that aside. I got really emotional in my office because I have 4 children. I heard about patronizing visitors to Santa Barbara that they should go to the beach. I was shocked. We should drive certain types of cars. I was shocked. So it's not about Ray and what he's done for the community. I have no business associations. I like Ray. He pisses me off sometimes as well. But I ask that is there some way, we're allowed to talk, we're speaking. But I hear somebody tell the council, and I have to apologize for this, there's no efficiency. Things aren't getting done fast enough, At the same time, how many appeals has this city seen from the person saying that? So I would ask, is there a way to, stop that in itself? The boy who cried wolf, it's kind of ridiculous. And as a taxpayer, a business owner, multiple business owner, it's frustrating. It's extremely frustrating. We don't live in the 70s. Don't tell me what car I should drive. Lack of parking equates to less DUIs on the road. All right? People are smarter. We carpool. And it's just a frustrating process to watch. And I apologize to you because you get the bad end of that stick, you know. And so with this parking, Blue Water Grill, they have a parking lot. They have valet. It's always wide open. It's always wide open. I manage a building where the trolleys are. I'm a real estate broker. And they have some use of the public parking because they did a deal with the Californian city, and there's always parking. So we're talking about parking. And don't be scared, love. Really, truthfully, can give me my end sentence here. We cannot be scared of the people who continuously try to stop the movement forward and progress in our community. And those delays then brought back to you as if it's your fault. It's frustrating. So
thank you so much.
I propose
Your
we
time
ask
is up.
what that person's done for this community, and how do we stop the wasted time generated by that person on our city council and
that's
everybody
fine.
else. So
Yeah.
let's solve that problem first.
Thanks. Did you have a question for this? Okay. Speaker, I just forgot to read what Jason Yeager said, was that the project should be approved. It updates the ADA. It makes the building structurally sound, and it fits in the funk zone. And with that, we're going to close public comment. Ms. Sneddon, the applicant and the appellant both have a little time left over. Yeah, so we're not quite ready. Ms. Gott, you have 1 minute, 24 seconds if you wanted to close with some remarks. Do you think you could go forward without your visuals?
I'll just go ahead and play it. I think that you've already seen this. This is the valet parking. Why isn't this actually? It's not. Can you have him go first before I don't know what's wrong here. I don't know. So I don't think it's going to actually show anything.
So it's a video of the valet.
Okay, so I apologize. I think that you all know that we've got problems with the Hotel Californian. And I've also shown you the videos of the valets that are parking vehicles on the street. That's a problem. It's a problem that you haven't solved. And we've heard supposedly there's a ton of free parking available in the funk zone, and parking isn't a problem. Well, if that's really the case, then why do we have a residential parking program in the West Beach? Why do West Beach residents complain about the parking and the employees from the funk zone parking in their neighborhood, and they can't find their own parking spaces? They can't use them. If they leave when it's a street sweeping day, they often cannot go back and park anywhere remotely by their homes because we have a parking problem. And that parking problem is because of the excess amount of development with the lack of required parking. We need a parking and business improvement area, and we actually need a structure to house all of these parking
Time is up.
Parking spaces. Thank you.
All right. So did you want to come up, Mr. Gorin? Let me set the timer.
Madam Chair, members of the council, I don't really think we have anything that we need to add. I just want to say I'm encouraged at the amount of support that we've received from this project. It takes a lot to come out of work and come down here, and I appreciate that people did that, and it's especially encouraging to hear support from our tenants. I've been involved in some similar projects where that wasn't the case, and I'm glad that this one is working out well in that regard. I think the facts here that you've seen from your staff and in our presentation absolutely serve as the basis to make the findings you need to make to deny this appeal and uphold the project. And all I'll say is if you've got questions during your deliberations, please ask. I'm available. Ed DiVicente, the architect, is available. And lots of times I see a question that I could have answered in 10 seconds get debated for half an hour. And so hopefully, if you do have a question like that, we can save some time. Thank you.
Are there questions? Okay, so you don't have a question for us, so thanks. But I will give staff an opportunity to respond to anything that you heard. You're all good? Okay. So now it's to council deliberations. Ms. Sneddon, I know you had your light on first. Mr. Rouse, were you before? So Mr. Rouse, and then Ms. Harmon, and then Mr. Friedman. So that's our stack. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I first want to say this has always been one of my favorite buildings in Santa Barbara for more than 30 years. And I can't tell you how thrilled I am about the plan to maintain the character of the front and to support the arts. And that's been one of the biggest issues with the Funk Zone, is driving out artisans in place of higher end restaurants. And this is doing both, which I think is a really creative solution. I share Mr. Williams' comments and thoughts there on that it is the best of both of the Funk Zone there. I also give congratulations to staff and compliments on having this be a creative solution. And I am easily able to support the findings that this project is consistent with the Coastal Act and consistent with the city's local coastal plan. And I'm happy to move staff recommendation to deny the appeal.
Okay, I heard Mr. Dominguez second first. Okay, so we're moving to deny the appeal and to incorporate the Planning Commission findings. Well, I'll find the number. Here it is right here. It's the Planning Commission Resolution 014-19. It's attachment 5. Okay, so that's incorporated into the, okay, so Mr. Rouse was next.
Actually, Madam Mayor, that's pretty much where I wanted to go. I don't want to belabor this. I think it's a pretty well done by Planning Commission, all the review boards. So,
very good. Ms. Harmon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will keep this short as well. I will also be voting to deny the appeal. I will say to the appellant, I hear in her presentation a discomfort with parking in general in our city, and that she clearly sees this modification as a symptom of that discomfort. But I will say the mere existence of a modification is not in and of itself justification for overturning a decision that was taken in compliance with our rules and processes. Particularly in the case of this modification, the grounds were really expertly studied and addressed, and we had unanimity from our Planning Commission, which is very important to me and certainly not something that we see all too often. And I think that is a signal of the excitement and really just the passion that we all have for this project. So I will be voting to deny.
Thanks. Mr. Friedman.
I will also be voting to deny the appeal. I just want to say that there is an expectation for property owners that if you go through the process, that you should have the right to redevelop your property, especially if you go through the Santa Barbara planning process. And you also get Planning Commission unanimous approval. They don't always agree. And then also the Coastal Commission did opine on this. So there's just that expectation. And I also want to thank the community for coming out. I think you've been heard loud and clear about this project. And then the other thing I want to just take a moment to note is the enhanced ADA access. We heard that the building itself has zero accessibility. But I learned today, I saw when it came together, is that it also extends the newly created access from the Garden Street lot. So you're actually creating much more access from one of the closest parking lots to this. So there's a huge improvement to ADA issues, which is very important to our community. And then the last thing I want to say is we do have 3 former council members that support this. 2 spoke tonight. Former council member Lodge is on the Planning Commission. So 2 of the 3 were there probably when this whole thing started back in the 70s with the Coastal Act and whatever the restaurant was back then. They've seen it come all the way through. So I appreciate all the work that they've put in, and we'll be denying the appeal.
I don't see any other lights. Mr. Dominguez, go ahead.
So I'll join that. And I agree with Ms. Gott. A majority of the time when she's fighting for residential properties in Santa Barbara, she's been an amazing person in saving affordable housing, in promoting workforce housing. The irony here is some of the housing you've helped save will house some of the workers who work in this restaurant. It's with less enthusiasm that I look at your work with some of the commercial projects, particularly here where we're not adding any more to the footprint. This was a pre-existing footprint. It would be one thing if Mr. Mahboub was putting a new building in the parking lot, but he's actually restoring an old building that we all love. And some of the tenants there, Wally and Jill, I mean, their stuff is just first-rate Santa Barbara stuff. We've been known for an art city for over a century, but the kind of work Wally does, I mean, that just gives us a whole nother element to our art scene. And the clothing that Jill designs, I mean, that's just one of a kind, adds us more to the map or keeps us on the map. So the more we can do in the funk zone, that really helps in other areas of town where we're losing some of our luster, not having the businesses survive and thrive. So to the extent this is really adding to our core holdings, this is amazing. So I'm really excited about this project. And it's part of the gateway to Santa Barbara. State Street, we've invested dozens of millions with the bridge, the Mission Creek Bridge, with the new Blue Water Grill, with the Hotel Californian. This is really just an amazing part of Santa Barbara. It's just the core of our city at this point. I'd love to figure out a way to link it to the Mission. Do we put a tram on State Street up to the Mission? Do we go all the way back up to the Riviera Theater? How do we do something that really reunites our city?
Thanks. Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will be rejecting the appeal and look forward to the further revitalization of that area. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll be voting for the motion. It was very nice, I'm sure, for Mr. Mahboub to hear people say nice things. And yes, we're talking about entrepreneurship and the vitality of the area, but this is a land use appeal. We're talking about parking, and all of that has been answered through staff. And the applicant, I'm rejecting it on the grounds of the land use appeal. And it's not that hard. It's just the rules. They're following the rules. So let's take a roll call vote. Ma'am.
Madam Mayor, I think City Attorney Kalan would like to say something real quick.
Go ahead, Mr.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, as I understand the motion, it's adopting the Planning Commission's findings. My advice would be that in addition to that, recommendation 2 of the staff report be included so that in addition to the Planning Commission resolution, we can answer the questions raised in the appeal in hopes of defending your decision both before the Coastal Commission and in court.
Would you incorporate that into your motion?
Yes, Madam Mayor, thank you.
And the seconder was Rouse? Okay. Do we understand the motion? Thanks. Ms. Rodriguez.
Councilmember Gutierrez?
Yes.
Councilmember Harmon?
Yes.
Councilmember Rouse?
Aye.
Councilmember Sneddon?
Yes.
Councilmember Dominguez?
Aye, and I think I may have seconded that, so I do incorporate the change if it was me.
Mayor Pro Tem Friedman?
Yes.
And Mayor Murillo?
Aye. That's a unanimous 7-0 vote. And I think we can close this item. Folks, that's okay. We discourage clapping because then we have to allow booing. So we say neither. And if you could exit quietly, we still have more of our meeting left. Thank you. We're closing that. We're going on to our committee assignment reports. And we were off last week, so maybe some of us have 2 weeks worth of stuff to report. Ms. Sneddon, go ahead. It looks like you're ready. Yeah. The microphone only picks you.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So,
keep it down, folks.
In this last 2 weeks, I experienced a lockdown situation at Santa Barbara City College, which made me very grateful that we've updated our dual language emergency alert system. I've also attended Comb Tree Committee meeting. Thank you. Also attended Comb Tree Committee meeting, discussing the plans for, we're getting close to the end of this mitigation project of planting thousands of trees, and we're getting close to the end of that. Attended a meeting convened by yourself, Mayor Murillo, discussing storage of goods and with various homeless advocates. Attended the Santa Barbara Reads author talk. That was really a phenomenal pick by our library. And to have such broad appeal to youth and different audiences. It was a fantastic event. CCRB meeting, still discussing negotiations with the Bureau of Reclamation and NIMS. Attended First Thursday reception. Oh, we hosted a First Thursday reception in the mayor and council office for Santa Barbara Artworks. That was really well attended and a great event. And had our first De La Guerra Plaza Advisory Committee meeting. We decided at that meeting I am serving as chair and Leslie Wiscombe is vice chair. Met with the director of corporate relations at UCSB. He has some interesting ideas about housing. Participated in the Veterans Day Parade. Attended the Upper East Association annual meeting where the presenter discussed the water history of Santa Barbara. Had another Comb operations meeting, again discussing the secured pipeline plans and sedimentation studies. We had a sustainability committee meeting discussing REACH codes, and this morning at sea level rise adaptation plan subcommittee meeting. Our next meeting on that will be next week.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Friedman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I attended also the Sea Level Rise Subcommittee, the Veterans Day celebration at the Santa Barbara Cemetery. Thank you to the Pierre Cleyson's Foundation for hosting a great community event to honor all of our veterans each year. The Santa Barbara ACT Open House, Edison Wildfire Community Meeting, the Visitor Center Grand Opening, the World Business Academy presented on Rigs to Reefs, and the CEC had hosted a climate resiliency roundtable focusing on wildfires.
Mr. Dominguez?
I attended the Sea Level Rise Adaptation Plan, and my calendar's not on, so I don't remember the other things, but I'll get back to you.
Okay. Ms. Harmon?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I also attended the grand opening of the Santa Barbara Visitor Center. That was great. I brought my daughter, and she loved it. It was also at the First Thursday reception and the Veterans Day Parade. I attended the Access Advisory Committee meeting last week, and I've been working with the chairs of that committee to discuss our ADA transition plan, and we're having some really good conversations about that, and that will be coming to the Access Advisory Committee in the coming quarters. We meet quarterly. I also participated in a panel at Unity of Santa Barbara on building community in a polarized society, and with Councilmember Gutierrez attended Neighborhood Advisory Council.
I'd like to thank the Pierre Cleyson's Foundation and the other groups that organized the Veterans Day event at the Santa Barbara Cemetery. Mr. Gutierrez, you were there. Mr. Friedman. Downtown Santa Barbara had their board meeting this morning. Our Mark Aguilar in our planning department, who serves as the business liaison to the business community, made a nice report. It's actually a meeting where the city reports to the business community more than I have something to tell you what they're up to. But our sustainability committee met on the green building codes, and then also looking at the use of natural gas as something that contributes to climate change. More on that to come. I'm participating in a group that is looking at applying for a grant for affordable housing. It's the Affordable Housing and Sustainability Communities grant from the state. It was convened by a woman from the League of Women Voters. I got to give her credit. It was her idea. But we're having meetings if anybody else wants to help with that. I gave a certificate to George Doubles for turning 100 over at Valverde, and he's the father-in-law of one of our employees, and so that was great. Our first Thursday open house was very successful. I attended a meeting of the Partners in Education. I'm on the board of directors there, and we're planning a big breakfast in December, and that's a group that provides computers for low-income families and creates paid internships for young people in our area. I also chaired the South Coast Youth Safety Partnership. That was a summit, and the topic was how do people who work with gang risk youth take care of themselves. We also looked at our strategic plan, which you all should have in your possession, from Saul Serrano from the Community Action Commission, which administers that. I attended... the county of Santa Barbara convened a meeting of all the cities in the county to talk about us pooling our money that's coming down from the state for homeless beds, possibly a homeless shelter. So that was a couple of weeks ago, excuse me, and so I'll let you know more about that effort. Kind of sounds good for us not to put projects forward that compete, but rather let's get the money and make it one big project that's helpful. On the subject of homelessness, tomorrow at 9:30 at the Faulkner Gallery, our city-focused homelessness collaborative is having its first all-call meeting, and that's with SB ACT as the administrator. So tomorrow, Wednesday, 9:30, Faulkner Gallery, and you can hear about all the activities that we're putting forward to help our neighbors who are experiencing homelessness. So that concludes that reporting part. We still have closed sessions to do. Ms. Clerk, we're doing all of them? It's not that late, huh? It just feels late because it's dark outside. But can you read the items, please? 17, yes. 18, and 19.
Item number 17, subject, conference with city attorney, existing litigation, Government Code Section 54956.9 D1, as described in agenda item number 17. Item number 18, subject, conference with city attorney, existing litigation, Government Code Section 54956.9 D1, as described in agenda item number 18. And item number 19, subject, conference with city attorney, anticipated litigation, Government Code Section 54956.9 D2, and E3, significant exposure to litigation arising from the threat against proposed SB South Coast TBID made for Stone Park Capital on 10/30/19 by Steinbrecher and Span, as described in agenda item number 19.
So we will be adjourning to closed session right now, and the next time we meet as a city council is Thursday morning. It's a joint meeting with our Planning Commission, and the topic is our average unit size density incentive program. So Thursday morning, 8:30, the Gebhard Room. Okay, meeting adjourned to closed session.